Sound off, phone silent. Little affirmations. I will not disrupt the meeting. Did you see Jillian Keene's retiring?
I did, yeah, she had one there. Who's retired?
The clerk of Vevey Township.
Oh, I saw that, yeah.
4 months after she got elected.
Seriously?
Fed up, huh?
She's been at it for a while too.
Yeah, it happens a lot in this position. Wow. Surprising.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, and this is the Township Board of the Chartered Township of Meridian, and this is our regular meeting of May 8th. We will call this meeting to order. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Will those who are able please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda is item 3, a roll call. Will Deputy Clerk Gordon please call the roll?
Supervisor Hendrickson.
Here.
Clerk Demas.
Here.
Treasurer DeShane.
Here.
Trustee Lentz.
Here.
Trustee Sunland.
Here.
Trustee Trezise.
Here.
Trustee Wilson.
Here.
All board members are present.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is item 4, citizens address agenda items and non-agenda items. There are several opportunities for public comment at tonight's meeting. Members of the public who wish to address our agenda or any item not on our agenda have an opportunity to do so at the beginning of our meeting as well as near the end of our meeting. Those who do wish to address the board must complete a green card. Green cards can be found next on the table near the door, and they can present that card to the board or a member of the township staff prior to the start of public comment. When it's your turn, the supervisor, that's me, will call up the next speaker to the podium to speak to the topics indicated. While it's not required, it is helpful for the sake of our meeting minutes if you provide your name and address at the beginning of your remarks. Citizens are required to limit comments to 3 minutes. An automated system will keep track of the time, and an indicator light and audible beep will alert you when your time has expired. Members of the board value public comment and input. The meeting format and rules, however, do restrict board members from engaging in conversation or with commenters or answering questions directly. Questions and concerns may be addressed by board members at a later time or may be referred to a member of the township staff to follow up on. Please address all comments to the board and or the board's chair and not to individual board members or to others in the audience. But that said, we have a number of green cards, so thank you very much for everyone doing that in advance. First up this evening, we have Gaylord Mankowski, followed by Jeff Kessner is on deck.
Good evening, everybody. Gaylord Mankowski, 2362 Sauer Boulevard, Okemos, Michigan. Longtime resident, longtime employee, now retired. Here on behalf of Santa's first responders, we've been around since 1990. Started out in the 2 trailer parks. And my dad and I started it, having party for kids in need, and there was quite a few of that. We've evolved here in 2025. I've been around for 34, 35 years. Now we have a cancer mission. We take kids, send them to Nashville to ride horses, up in Franklin to ride horses. We're the group that takes over Sparrow once a year during the holiday, and surround and visit every kid in the hospital. And we still have a party. Last year we had about 400 kids that Marna was at. And so I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of history of it. If you got a question to ask, or you can go to santasfirstresponders.org. However, we've put a proposal together to buy your fire truck. And I'm here if you have questions about it. We're going to call it Reindeer 1. I think it's going to be the gem of the township. And we're willing to participate, celebrate Meridian, any township event that I can get somebody to drive it, because I'm not qualified, but we have CDL holders that will be driving it. We will, along with Silver Bells, downtown Lansing, homecoming parade. We've already started the works on that. And my goal is to take it to events. So a kid fighting cancer will go to his birthday party. We'll take them to a ball game, like we're taking 5 or 6 families to a Love Nets game on the 18th of May. These are the kind of things we do year round. But if anybody has questions on what we're going to do with it or not do with it, A&D is gonna help us wrap it, along with a company out of Ann Arbor that was generously donated. It's gotta be 15 grand worth of labor, but it's all arranged. And due to folks in the township, we did a GoFundMe. We had the money, but boom, we had the money right away. And then we're selling sponsorships on the back for $500 a pop, and your name, like in memory, because everybody has a cancer story, right? Like or not, wish nobody did, but we do. Or businesses, that Meridian businesses have come out of the woodwork to support this. So it's a community involved thing. We're a nonprofit. And I don't know if I'm basically here to ask questions. We've been around a long time, so that's why I came. We have no plans to respond to fires or any shenanigans. That phase is past us, long gone. But we're gonna decorate inside. It's gonna look like a fairy tale
30
for
seconds.
kids. So that's all I have to say. Thanks, and I hope you consider it. We're ready to rock and roll on it. We have insurance on it already. I kind of put the cart in front of the horse, but, and I can be here tomorrow with a check or whenever that day comes. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That item is 10B on our agenda. We appreciate you coming out. Jeff Kessner, and then Larry Ezzo is on deck.
Good evening, Jeff Kessner, Hazlet resident. The last thing that Meridian Township homeowners need are higher taxes. The last thing Meridian Township needs is another $44 million worth of debt for a community center or $10 million for a senior center over a 20-year period. This proposal comes at a time when Ingham County has the highest taxes of any county in Michigan. Meridian Township taxes are the highest of any township in Michigan. Meridian Township taxes are 27% higher than DeWitt and 22% higher than Delta Township. The average homeowner in Meridian Township pays over $10,000 in taxes compared to $8,000 in DeWitt and $7,000 in West Bloomfield. Township residents are already paying for 19 parks. According to a 2025 personal finance survey, 53% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and 40% are unable to cover a $1,000 emergency in cash. At the same time you are talking about making homeownership more affordable, you now have a proposal to raise taxes on homeowners. Eaton County voters just rejected a tax proposal and now has to cut essential services. So to conclude, this proposal is a want, not a need. I repeat, a want, not a need. Seniors in our community already are paying for gym memberships, golf and pickleball leagues, swimming pools for exercise, and the list goes on. This proposal is too big of an ask that would require homeowners to take on an additional tax burden when they are already stretched to the limit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Larry Ezzo and Beth Bechtel is on deck.
Yeah, my name is Larry Ezzo, and I live in Hazlet. Do I need to give my address?
If you would.
Hey, well, it's 5643 Ventura Place. But I am opposed to this project for the senior center because of the high taxes. I don't want to pay any more high taxes in Meridian Township. We've been here for a number of years, and I'm a retired person, and I don't need, we just don't need it. It's not a necessary item. I agree with what Jeff said. It's more of a want than more of a need. Quick story, I took care of my mom before she passed away. We used to go to all these care centers and look at the place, and it was nice. You know, knew this, knew that, carpet, tablecloths. My mom didn't need any of that, okay? She didn't need any of that fancy stuff. She didn't need anything brand new. She needed to eat at 5, watch TV. And it's just an unnecessary thing that you people are doing, and we don't appreciate it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Beth Bechtel, and then Heidi Doherty is on deck.
Beth Bechtel, Hazlet, Michigan. Before I start, I just wanted to say I have an MBA in finance, and I've worked as a financial analyst for years. I'm retired now. Dear board members, I want to again commend and thank the board for being fiscally and financially responsible to the residents last August when the board voted no on the very large and extremely expensive Yonkers Community Center at 40,000 total finished square feet, $2 million in annual operating costs per year, and $78 million in total initial cost over 20 years. The new community center proposal now presented to the board has a new operating tax millage with a 10-year term, making it very challenging to compare it to the baseline Yonkers Community Center 20-year term. So the big question that begs to be asked now is, how does the new community center proposal compare to that expensive Yonkers Community Center proposal in regards to total cost over the 20-year term? This comparison was not presented nor laid out in today's board packet to examine. Additionally, all options on page 94 do not even have the very basic critical metric of total finished square feet provided. Everything is very vague in regards to this very important comparison. Many more questions remain unanswered. Today, the board votes on a proposal for 2 tax millages to meet next week's deadline for this August election. Next question is, what is the purpose of the rush to get the 2 tax millages on this August election when board discussions have just begun on these 2 very complex proposals? The rush is about the $5 million state grant being spent by the deadline September 30th, 2026. If this $5 million grant is for a new $10 million senior center, that is indeed noteworthy because that is about 50% half discount. However, if this $5 million grant is for a new $30 million community center, that is definitely less significant because that is a small 15% discount. A small half discount is very impactful, but a 15% discount not so much, especially when that 15% small discount comes at the extreme cost of being financially burdening township residents forever with a building that they may never even use. This forever financial burden will exponentially rise year after year. It's never good to make big financial decisions when in a rush. Now, note on the outside Progressive Companies documents, it states in small print that the exact scope of work and associated cost applied to a specific site will happen at that time. The financial costs presented are at the best generic estimate and most likely will significantly rise. Where we are today is very unsettling, rushing through 2 proposals that are even more vague and less defined than ever before. Never seen anything like this. The financials are a mess. So again, I respectfully ask the board members to please remain steadfast and continue to place primary and utmost importance on being fiscally and financially responsible to the township residents. Please help safeguard our families and our household budgets by voting no on any new property tax millages. Thank you.
Thank you. Heidi Doherty, and then Steve Vegnosi.
Hi, thanks for listening to me. So Heidi Doherty, I live in Hazlet. I am here to speak in opposition to any new and/or additional property tax millages. Meridian Townships is already the highest taxes of any township in Michigan. We are living in very uncertain economic times right now. Other cities have had to bail out their community centers, taking funds from essential services and capital improvement projects to continue their community centers. Staffing, snow removal, landscape maintenance has been a nightmare for community centers if you can get staff at all. Meridian Township already has 19 parks. We have a mall with lots of small open spaces that are empty. Security and snow removal and landscape already done awesomely at that mall. They get rid of that snow. We have 20-plus workout facilities and independent gyms here. Senior discounts are offered. If you're over 65, for an example, Planet Fitness, YMCA, and Crunch, and others are free. They're free for anybody over the age of 65. Planet Fitness also offers free summer memberships for ages 14 through 19-year-olds, and the list goes on. Keep taxing us, and you won't have to worry, and you won't have any seniors to join the senior center. Absolutely no community center, absolutely no more taxes. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Steve Vegnosi and Chris Clark.
Steve Agnosi, Riverwood Park in Okemos. Just want to make clear that I am speaking for myself and only myself at this point. Seniors need a new senior center. The existing senior center is going to be demolished as part of the upgrades to the Okemos Schools Chippewa campus. I know that information is out there that the community desires a community center, which will serve a larger group than a senior center only. In looking at the proposals for a combined center, I believe that option 4A is the best option. It allows for, unlike option 4B, it allows for additional capacity in the future. The bond millage is significantly higher and lasts twice as long for a combined center, 20 years versus 10 years. I encourage the board to be mindful of the uncertain economic environment that we face in at least the near future. Finally, I request that the board evaluate trade-offs when deciding which proposal to ask voters to approve. And there needs to be some fallback plan for the senior center. The senior center participation is constantly inching up. And it's not unusual when I go for my massage on a Wednesday afternoon for there to be 25 to 30 people in the center doing various activities. I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Chris Clark, and then David Clark.
Chris Clark, 4538 Seneca Drive, speaking in opposition of a millage to build a large community and senior center. I would be in favor of a smaller standalone senior center. Property taxes in our township are some of the highest in the state already. The state of Michigan has a handy property tax estimator on their website. I tried to find any community with higher taxes than Meridian Township, and I couldn't. My same house would cost me far less in property taxes if I lived in Grosse Pointe, Bloomfield Hills, Rochester, East Grand Rapids, etc. It would be fiscally irresponsible and devastating to the residents of the township for you to consider placing an additional tax burden on them for the next 20 years or more, especially given the current economic environment. Many of you profess to be concerned about the availability of single-family homes in the township, yet I see you consistently vote against single-family affordable housing, including a recent vote to rezone single-family property to high-priced multiple-family rentals. Don't let tonight's vote be another vote to destroy the dream of home ownership and inhibit access to affordable housing in this township. Your actions speak far louder than your words. My biggest concern with this community center is the lack of clarity around the financial data for the project. Information on expected costs versus revenue for comparison and understanding has not been clearly presented side by side in a spreadsheet format, nor is it easily found in the hundreds of pages of meeting handouts, and it's not always consistent. Anticipated revenues on one page and expected costs might be found 30 pages later. It seems like there is a rush to get millage language on the August ballot without a clear presentation and understanding of all the financial variables and implications to the community, both now and 20 or 30 years down the line. Other community combined senior centers in the state have large deficits every year. It would be negligent to believe that Meridian Township would be different. Can the township point to one community center that isn't running a deficit? What happens to your $5 million grant if you put this huge community center millage on the ballot and it gets voted down? I'm sure you've seen all the millages this week that have not passed. That's a very real possibility here. Please put the needs of the community you represent above your own personal desires and protect the fiscal health of the township and residents by voting for a smaller standalone senior center. Be good stewards of the township's resources with which you have been entrusted. Thank you.
Thank you. David Clark, and then Neil Bowlby.
Hi there, Dave Clark. I live at 4538 Seneca in Okemos. And I just want to say I could support a small standalone senior center, but I can't get behind a community center in that in this agenda millage. I just don't see an appetite for more taxes. I heard that tonight, but we're already in a community that already has high taxes. The math in the packet was hard to follow, so I can see the community center being a continued drain on taxes and other resources each year. Spending over 40 million just to use 5 million doesn't seem fiscally responsible. So my thought, I heard it tonight before, or earlier tonight, but the note I had was like wants versus needs. And, you know, I know a community center is a nice want, but I don't think we need that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Neil Bowlby, and then David Batten is on deck.
Thanks, Steve. Neil Bowlby, 6020 Beechwood. So what I'm showing here are the results from the 2023 community survey. This was the first question, asking whether people thought that the township would benefit from a multi-generational community center. And you can see that there was quite a bit of support for that idea. That was for Yonkers at the Meridian Mall. I think it would be unwise to assume that there's overwhelming support because the question was very specific. I'm surprised that it wasn't higher than what's shown there, but people may have read into it the question more than what was asked. Okay. So at your last meeting, it was stated during the discussion that people over 65 in the township make up only 16% of our community. And while this is true, keep in mind the senior center is open to people 55 and above. And so 55 and above actually amounts to about 28.5% of the township, which is a potential 12,000 people that would qualify to participate in the senior center. It was also asked whether we're putting 0.33 mils for 390 people, but remember that throughout the discussions, when this was being developed by the task force, there was always the thought that with more programming and activities that enrollment would increase. So in the citizen survey, about 74% of people 55 and above said that they would use a senior center. So that equates to about 9,500 users. This is the results from that, and you can see the high proportion, the huge number of 55 and above that are in favor, that would use a senior center. The mock millage that was talked about last time was conducted by the township, and about 60% of the respondents said they'd support 0.75 to 1 mil increase. Few details were given about the methodology. Given the number of respondents, the margin of error is a plus or minus 8%. So if you do that, it comes out to be about 50-50. It was taken during the post-pandemic recovery when we had what was called our economy was the envy of the world. Are things going to be the same 3 months from now? And for those going back to the survey, those under 55 years of age, only 45%, this is who would be in favor of a quote-unquote gap millage to fill the gap. And you can see that the 45 to 54, actually people don't want to support that millage.
Thank you very much.
Be very careful about which one you pick, and make sure you have a backup plan if it doesn't get passed. Thank you.
Thank you. David Batten, and then Joe Fox is on deck.
Good evening. David Batten, 1064 Woodside Drive in Hazlet. I'd like to take just a moment to thank you and all of the others that have been engaged in this process for your efforts and diligence. So thank you. A few factors make me believe that this is not the time for such an ongoing expenditure and millage increase. I will omit restating the rates of property taxes for Ingham County and Meridian Township since they have been mentioned frequently. But at this point, it's not whether something is a want or a need, but is it essential? Our goal of developing affordable housing within the township would be more difficult with this increase in millage. And the band played on. The tumult of international and national economics, the disregard for the rule of law, and a renegade president is not normal. Making an additional long-term financial commitment under these conditions seems ill-advised. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Joe Fox, and then Timothy Ziegler is on deck.
Good evening. Thank you all. You're all very attentive to all of the responses here. I'm not opposed to good ideas like the senior center or the community center. I'm opposed to any kind of millage increase, the total taxes. You've heard the story, you've seen the data, the taxes are way too high. I've said to my wife for a number of times, it's like there are going to be some great things that have come along. They're going to be put on the ballot for millage. I just can't vote for it anymore. It's like all the stuff that's already there, I just can't increase it anymore. And for me, I don't want to go through some of the things that you've already heard, you've talked about in the past meetings, but for me, it was one of the milestones was about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago, my monthly property tax bill exceeded my mortgage payment. And it's like, that is concerning when that happens. So that's twofold. One is that's pretty darn high. And then the other part is when I go to sell my house, if I'm hopefully not forced out by taxes, if I go to sell my house, that needs to factor in for somebody that's facing high interest rates, elevated property taxes, elevated property values. They're not going to be able to afford my house. So when I need to get out because the taxes have gone so high, I'm not going to be able to get out. It's just going to be unaffordable. And the salary level that's going to take for somebody to buy my house is just getting very concerning. So that was the main thing. It was like, I think this was an example of these are great ideas, but I can't participate or vote for any good ideas just because of the level we're at right now with the millages. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Timothy Ziegler, and then Nathaniel Marriott is on deck.
In order to impart wisdom, Timothy Ziegler, Ascot Place, Hazlet, Michigan. In order to impart wisdom upon her simple son, Forrest Gump's mother used to say, "Stupid is as stupid does." Now, it is my opinion that it is stupid to spend money that I don't have on something that I don't need in a time of economic insecurity. Please consider these words when you vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nathaniel Marriott, and then Stacy Taggerson is on deck.
Well, a lot of what I was going to say has already been said. Taxes, everything's high. But I'm middle class, working class American. I chose to pay higher taxes to move my family to Meridian Township. And the reason is because we have a beautiful township, beautiful community. And we move in, my taxes went up. Within the first year I moved up, my property taxes started to hit. That's gonna happen, bought a new house, property values have gone up, things like that. Now, this community center is going to potentially hit, and I'm looking at whether or not I can keep my family in the community I chose to pay higher taxes to move into, knowing full well that I was going to be paying higher taxes just because this is the community. This is where I grew up. This is where all my kids grew up. I went to Hazlet schools. I wanted them to go to Hazlet schools. And now I'm looking at, if this goes through, potentially not being able to do that because I can no longer afford my property taxes. We elected you. You represent the entire community, all of us, the wealthy, the working class, maybe even some of our lower class. You have to consider all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stacy Taggerson and Barbara O'Kelly is on deck.
Hi, good evening. Stacy Tadgerson. I'm a Hazlet resident, and I'd like to once again congratulate everyone for the wonderful community that we live in, the stewardship that has happened thus far. I'm a huge fan of our parks and our trails and our parks and rec, the Polar Bear Run, the Farmers Market, and I am an avid fan of healthy lifestyle overall. However, I cannot get behind the new community center and senior center as packaged presently. My main concern is that there's an operational budget deficit gap, from what I could tell, about $1 million annually. As someone, an entrepreneur that would go in and ask a bank for a loan to open a business with a clear budget deficit, I hardly think I would be able to obtain a loan to open a business such as that. I suggest possibly capital campaigns, other grants, but certainly no new millage in regards to this project as packaged. I thank you for your time, and I will submit written comments at a later date this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara O'Kelly, and then Signey Rich is on deck.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. I'm Barbara O'Kelly. I live in Wood Hill in Okemos. And I'm speaking as a member of the advisory board of the Meridian Senior Center, the current center. When we considered the 5 proposals that the board is considering, plus a 6th of none of the above, we cannot support any of these at the current time. Primarily because we do not feel that the layout of the senior center standalone or the combined center would be attractive or safe for our senior citizens. We want to, if you pass one of these 5, put one of these 5 before this goes to the public with a more complete design of how it's going to be laid out, both the exterior building and the interior space. We would like very much to be involved in the design of this, and perhaps we can come up with something that is better. Despite our meeting, and we're very thankful to Manager Dempsey and the Chief of Police and Officer. We met about the public safety for the building. We are not persuaded that a separate entrance for seniors is more safe for people than separate entrances. We believe a key card system should be used to enter the senior center with a doorbell such as we have now, a monitored doorbell so they can see who's bringing it, and there's always somebody at the current senior center when it's open to open, otherwise that door doesn't open. We would also like dedicated parking with a gated lot if it's a combined center, so that we can use the same key card. We hope that if you do put this on the ballot, if you put any one of these, or if you put the standalone senior center on the ballot, that you include the language that it will be designed to accommodate future expansion, since this is a condition of the grant from the state. We hope that you will emphasize this in any informational campaign that you would undertake over the summer. Thank you for your time, and thanks for all of the work you've all put in on this. We're really very grateful.
Thank you. Signee Rich, and then Tim Wellemeyer. And this is, no Tim? Okay, then Mr. Rich. This is the last green card we have. If anyone else wishes to speak, now would be a time to fill out the green cards. Sir.
Hello, excuse me. I want to thank you all for your time, because I remember these meetings because I used to be on the Planning Commission 30 years ago. I am now a senior, and I am opposed to this being what seems to be rushed to get on the ballot. A couple of just kind of miscellaneous stories with respect to our property taxes, and I don't want to reiterate what everybody has just gone through, and I'll save you some time and also us. But I used to sell multiple listing systems to real estate associations, and part of my half of the United States was my territory, and part of Canada was my territory. We created a product that integrated public records data with multiple listing data. It was very unique. It was in the early 80s. And so I speak not with authority, but with some background in this area with respect to what's happening out there in the rest of the world with respect to property taxes. I emailed everybody here recently something that was provided by Realtor.com stating that the median property tax for the entire United States is $3,500. So relative to the rest of the United States, we are high, as a number of people have mentioned. The second thing I wanted to make note of is that Williamston, I go to Brighton every 2 weeks, and I pass by Mirendorf, what used to be Mirendorf's Meat Market, which is now Williamstown Township Senior Center. The way I understand it, they bought that property for about $1 million. It's remote because it's out kind of close to the highway. And every time that I pass that, I miss Mirendorf's number 1, and I notice the parking lot empty. And so part of this whole process of seeing, are we creating something from a demand perspective and moving on something too early? Normally, how much do I have? It's all up.
That's it, yeah, that's it.
I don't get to tell stories. This is part of my job. Okay, well, I agree with Beth. I agree with Joe, and they've stated what they believe is reasons not to go through with this. But I see it, do I get like hooked if I talk too much? And so thank you very much for your time. I love Meridian Township. I've lived here for 40 years or something like that. But I think this is something that needs to be, and I hate to say this too, evaluated more, but to put it on the ballot, just to get it on the ballot for speeds purposes is not what I would do.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other public comment, public comment is closed at 6:38 p.m. Next item on our agenda is item 5, the Township Manager Report. Manager Dempsey.
Yes, just a few things this evening. So at your next meeting on May 20th, we'll begin some preliminary discussions around goal setting for the board. As you know, we would typically do that in December for the following year, but the thing that we're looking at changing this time is to do that ahead of the budget process so that all of your priorities hopefully can be better integrated into that process as we move forward. So look forward to that, and you can start thinking about what some of those priorities might be. The schedule for the 2025 community listening sessions has been set now. The first one will be held May 28th. from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at St. Luke's Lutheran Church on Van Adder Road in Hazlet. We'll have information on the website about that. The second one will be Tuesday, September 30th at Central Park Pavilion, if the weather permits. If not, it will be in this building, in this room, actually. And then the third one will be Thursday, November 13th at 242 Community Church. As we discussed before, we're trying to do one in the northern portion, central and southern portions of the township to encourage participation of all of our residents. I attended the Mount Hope Road Diet meeting this week, so this is information about the upcoming project. For people that want to learn more about it, they can go to the Ingham County Road Department website. I believe it's road.ingham.org to get the details if they weren't able to attend that. And I know that Trustee Wilson was also in attendance as well at that event. And then it's event season, that's upon us. So the outdoor farmers market is back Saturdays 8 to 2. The Memorial Day event is coming up, and there'll be more information coming out on that. That's, of course, on Memorial Day at 11 a.m. at Glendale Cemetery. So we encourage people to attend that, and it's a great event, and we're looking forward to that. And then we have the Pride event coming up on May 31st as well. And there'll be a resolution for that event in recognizing Pride and the LGBTQ community, and the next meeting on May 20th. So, and that's the end of my report for this evening. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions of Manager Dempsey on his report? Thank you very much, then. Next up is board member reports of activities and announcements. Board members with activities and announcements to report. I'm going to go ahead and get started if you don't mind. I don't usually get started first, but the 29th of April, we had in this room a meeting of our joint local government and schools meeting with representatives from the East Lansing Public Schools, from Bath Township, Williamstown Township, City of Mason, City of Lansing, Cattle, CATA, you name it. If there's an acronym for it, they were here. And it was a great opportunity to share our best practices amongst our neighbors and our local governments. All of us were in attendance as well, I believe as well. And so it was really excellent to talk about some really interesting topics and compare notes. And then on Thursday, the 1st of May, a number of us were here for a meeting with residents of Hewlett Road. As we may know, they are on the local road program list for 2026. And they are concerned because their current road has speed bumps, if you've ever driven down Hewlett Road north of the railroad tracks. And we are exploring whether speed bumps are the way of the future, or if there are other alternatives that may better suit their needs to calm traffic on that road. It's a good meeting put together by Gene Doss, who's a resident of that area, and Commissioner Polsdorfer, Dan Opsimer, our consultant from Spalding DeDecker, and a number of folks on the board, as well as members of Okemos Public Schools were here to hear their concerns and talk about what options there are in the future. So I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that over the next year as we prepare for Hewlett Road to be reconstructed. So that is my report. Other board members with reports and announcements. Clerk Demas.
I want to recognize Deputy Clerk Emily Gordon, who has received her MIPMC certification after 3 years of training offered by Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks. So congratulations.
Thank you.
That's it.
All right. Trustee Wilson.
I attended the open house for Mount Hope Road, just it feels like minutes ago. It was interesting, but the thing I want the public to know is it looks like it's not going to take all summer. So that would be very advantageous. It's going to be messy. There's going to be a stop at Comanche instead of having a light. There's going to be a lot of challenges to the construction, but it's not going to last a long time. That's all I have to report.
Thank you very much. Trustee Lentz.
Thank you. With our Thursday meeting this week, I was able to attend Environmental Commission before this one, so I have a fresh memory of what we spoke about last evening. I want to commend Deputy Township Manager Opsimer for his presentation related to climate sustainability funds, specifically a potential proposal around engineered bioshale in Marshall Park, which Hazlet residents might recognize is an area of significant flooding in our community, with Lake Lansing being the tributary that it is, and with our constant rain here in Meridian Township. Columbia Road, according to Dan's presentation, is arguably the wettest road in our township, most likely to flood, and this engineered bioshale as a potential usage for that excuse me, climate sustainability funding would be a great way to allow for proper drainage. It would be under purview rather than the Ingham County Drain offices because it is our park, and as Manager Opsimer mentioned, it would be one of the first in this area to do so, which could really be held up as an example. And as the representative on this board from the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission, Meridian is often heralded as the crown jewel of environmental standards of municipal government. Excuse me, throughout the evening, as I am quite allergic at this time of year. So, but it was a great presentation. I really look forward to learning more about it, and excited to do so.
Thank you very much. Other board members with reports? Treasurer DeShane.
Real quickly, I attended the Ingham County Health Committee meeting this week with with the clerk from Williamstown Township. They didn't know what townships did, so explained what townships did, how we operate, how to get through to us, and they were unaware that more than 52% of the state lives in townships rather than cities, and that 94% of the geographic mass of this state is townships and not cities. I expect we'll hear more from them, and they'll ask for input on health policy, which they advise the county health department with. It was a very productive meeting. Thank you.
Yes. Very good. Other reports? Yes, Trustee Sunland.
Yes, and I attended that meeting this last week on the Hewlett Road, and I found it really beneficial to just better understand what's going on, and hopefully everything gets it resolved. And I attended the Economic Development Corporation meeting on May 1st. And we were just pretty much talking about, well, one of the new things that we were talking about is the Juneteenth celebration that's coming up. Gosh, I don't have I think I wrote down the date, but anyway, it will be coming up in June, and it's probably around Father's Day is what I'm guessing. So anyway, that's pretty much what I had to report.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other reports of activities and announcements? Seeing none, we move on to our next agenda item, which is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda this evening?
Move to approve the agenda.
I'll support. Been moved by Trustee Wilson, supported by Trustee Trezise. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Next on our agenda this evening is our consent agenda. We have a number of items on our consent agenda, including communications with the Township Board. We have 4 sets of minutes. Our special Township Board meeting on April 12th, regular Township Board meeting on April 15th, the meeting minutes from our joint meeting with local schools and governments that we discussed, and then board members at your places, you'll find a manila envelope with closed session minutes from our April 29th meeting. If you can please review those and consider those for approval as well, and then we'll collect those back at the end. We also have the bills, a resolution to dispose of surplus equipment and vehicles, authorization for a change in Consumers Energy Standard lighting contract, and an appointment to the Economic Development Corporation. I guess do a motion on the consent agenda. Treasurer DeShane.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
It's moved by Treasurer DeShane. Do we have a support? Support. Supported by Trustee Lentz. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, Deputy Clerk Gordon, will you please call the roll?
Clerk Demus?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Lentz?
Yes.
Trustee Sundlin?
Yes.
Trustee Trezise?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Okay, board members, if you would, please pass in those manila envelopes. We have those all collected.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm missing the bookmarks in my packet here. Next on our agenda is item 9A, Brownfield Housing TIF Program Procedures Amendments. And we have Neighborhoods and Economic Development Director Amber Clark here.
Good evening. The proposed amendment to the Brownfield Programs and Policies and Procedures will authorize housing as defined in the Michigan Public Act 90 adopted in 2023 as an eligible activity. The initial program and policies procedures of the Brownfield Redevelopment Program for Meridian Township was adopted in 2018 and is the foundational basis of the amendment included in this document. Since our last discussion, we've made no substantive changes. The Brownfield Redevelopment Authority met this morning and did approve the changes as proposed. And I'm here to answer any other questions you may have.
Okay. Board members, we do have this item for action this evening, seeing that there were no substantive changes since our last discussion. Do we have a motion on the, yes, Trustee Trezise?
I move to adopt the modifications to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority Program, Policies, and Procedures, incorporating the proposed changes permitting housing as an eligible activity under PA 90 of 2023.
Okay, it's been moved by Trustee Trezise, supported by Trustee Lentz. Discussion on this topic, Trustee Trezise.
I think we discussed this at some length over a couple of meetings, probably 3 of them, and I think it's a great possibility that we can use to bring some reasonably priced housing into the township. It'd be interesting to see how it flows and how it works, but it's an opportunity to assist in developing those types of housing units, either multifamily or even individual homes. So I recommend approval.
Okay, Trustee Lentz.
I want to thank you, Director Clark, for walking us through this. I know I learned a lot through this process, and I think that, echoing Trustee Trezise's comments, I think it's a fantastic avenue for us to explore housing. I really enjoy that we were able to kind of mold it to what our community needs. And again, I appreciate your help in making that possible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Other discussion? I did have, I'm going to quibble with some of the wording in the memo a little bit, because I do think it's important that we recognize the impact that this does have. The memo indicates that the policy amendment has minimal impact on the budget, which is true, right? Enacting a policy on its own has no impact on the township budget. A TIF, once it's enacted, does actually, incorporate some fiscal impact on the community, does it not?
Our TIF will only reimburse after taxes are generated. So if taxes are not generated, there is nothing to reimburse. We're also not on the hook for a project that is not completed. So in a sense, the developer is going to invest in our community first, and the amenities that we are provided, we will reimburse them for those. There is very minimal impact to establishing these policies within the Brownfield plan. The impact to the Brownfield TIF, as proposed tonight, the fees for any administration will be covered based off of that when we adopt that during our budget process in the coming months.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. Well, I'll be supporting this motion this evening. We've talked about this a number of times, as I say, or as was said. This is an excellent way to help to spur redevelopment of our brownfield areas, specifically our high-impact brownfield areas in Hazlet and Okemos. We certainly want to be able to make sure that we have and make use of all the available tools in our tool belt to assist with redeveloping some of these key areas. And this is something that will help to both do that and also ensure that we have affordable housing coming into the township, which has been, as we know, a struggle in years past. And so I'll be looking forward to supporting this motion this evening. Treasurer DeShane.
I too will support this. Thank you for your excellent staff work on this one. This is a step in the right direction. We need to provide more moderate and affordable housing in the township. This doesn't solve the whole problem, but it's a step in the right direction. So I'm glad this was brought before the board, and I'll enthusiastically support this.
Thank you.
Any other discussion at this time? Seeing none, will Deputy Clerk Gordon please call the roll?
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Lentz?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Trezise?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
Clerk Demas?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seeing as the Senior Community Center will likely be a rather lengthy discussion, we'll take our break here. It is 6:54. We'll ask that we reconvene, please, at 7 p.m. without objection. Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. We've got a slightly smaller crowd than we had 5 minutes ago, but we appreciate the gumption of those who have remained. We have Deputy Manager Opsimer to kick things off this evening. Would you go ahead and get us started?
Good evening, Supervisor Hendrickson and board members. So just to kind of recap the prior two board meetings, at the board's April 3rd meeting, we started introducing the two task force recommendations to the board. One was for a senior center only option. The other was for a combined senior and community center. And then at the subsequent April 15th meeting, we went through the two task force recommendations, the finances associated with both of those options, and the resulting.
If we could, if you have a conversation, if you could take it to the hall, we would appreciate it. Thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
And the resulting millage rates for both of those options. It was the consensus of the board on April 15th that staff bring back 2 to 3 options that would scale back the square footage of a combined senior and community center. This evening before you, we have 5 options in total, which I will go through in a moment here. I did just want to make a quick note that the interest rate forecasts in the assumptions were updated since the April 15th meeting. So the task force recommendations did change ever so slightly. Nothing else with those 2 options has changed, just the interest rate assumptions at this point. So now I'm just going to walk you through the 5 options that are before you this evening. So in your packet, on page 94, you have this table listing all 5 options. So option 1 is the Senior Center Task Force recommendation. It is 20,493 square feet. And then in the first column, you can see the existing community services millage revenue. So this is how much we estimate that the millage will bring in over the first 10 years. In the second column, we have the existing community services millage fund balance. We have approximately $550,000 in fund balance. So those numbers are consistent across all the options because it's existing revenue. And then we have the new millage that would be required for operations to fill the gap based on the 5 options. So for option 1, it was just over 2.5 million in revenue from the new millage, and that is that requires a millage rate of 0.101. Total operations cost for the senior center only option from the task force was just over 5 million, and then construction was required a 0.2371 mil levy, and the total construction budget is 9.8 million. Bringing the total millage rate for option 1 to just over 1/3 of a mil. Option 2 is the combined senior and community center task force recommendation, which you saw at the last meeting. The size of the facility would be 53,784 square feet, and the new operating millage that would be required to operate the facility over the first 9 years would be 0.3985 mil. And then the construction budget for the Senior and Community Center Task Force recommendation was 29.1 million with a combined millage rate of just over 1.1 mil. And then option 3, 4A, and 4B are the new options that the board had asked for at the prior board meeting. So option 3 would eliminate the youth recreation room, which was at the north end of the facility. So this is the youth recreation area that was eliminated under option 3, and then also the activity meeting room here. We would still maintain the large meeting room with the warming kitchen, but these 2 rooms would be eliminated under this option. That reduces the square footage to 46,593 square feet, and it would lower the total millage rate between the 2 millages just under 1 mil. So we'd be at 0.9963. Option 4A is fairly similar in that we would still eliminate the youth recreation area and the activity meeting room, but we would also eliminate half the gym, the west half of the gym, located right here. Under this option, the gymnasium could be expanded in the future. So we would structure that west wall with an I-beam so that we could double the size of the gym to create a double court gym in the future if we wish to do so. Option 4B is identical to option 4A with the one exception.
I'm so sorry, could you give us the square footage, please?
Yes, 39,593 square feet.
Thank you.
Option 4B is identical in square footage because the only change is that this west wall, which would be constructed right here, would not allow for an addition in the future. So it's about $1 million to engineer that west wall to allow for that addition. The Yonkers proposal that the board considered in August of 2024 was discussed tonight. I did go back and look at the packet. So in August of 2024, the board considered a 1.1996 mill levy for the Yonkers proposal. The options before you tonight, option 1 for the senior only is about 72% less on the millage rate. Option 2 is 8% less on the millage rate. Option 3 is 17% less. Option 4A is 25% less. Option 4B is 27% less. And then I just want to remind the board briefly that tonight is the final night in which we can proceed with a millage and maintain the $5 million grant from the state of Michigan. So just for the public's knowledge, I know the board is well aware of this, the $5 million grant from the state of Michigan is American Rescue Plan Act funding. That funding across the country under federal law is required to be spent by September 30th, 2026. And so in order to fully design the project, bid it, and construct it, we would have to put this question before voters at the August 5th election to meet that deadline for the grant. So that is the reason for the third meeting tonight and why we are looking at the August 5th ballot and not the November ballot. So that is a brief overview of all five options, I should say. My apologies. And then lastly, in your packet, I did also just kind of update the cost per hour of operation of the five options. You'll notice that the number of hours of operation are consistent across options 2 through 4B. That's because our operating plan is that a community and senior center would be open 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, 72 hours per week. The senior center would be open 40 hours per week, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And with that, I would be more than happy to answer any other questions that the board may have, and we have Director Schmidt and Director Wazinski here as well.
Board members, do you have any questions? Treasurer DeShane.
I'm having a hard time getting a handle on the operation cost of this. On page 127 of the packet, you say under senior and community center, you estimate a cost would require a millage rate, this is for operations, of 0.3985 mils. And multiplying that times our millage rate of our taxable value of 2.4 billion, I come up with a number of about $2,649,000. But if you turn to page 130, you've got a operational cost of, page 120, you've got an operational cost of $1,419,000. So what is the operational cost per year of the combined option 2?
Are you looking at this page when you say page 120, Treasurer DeShane? Page that's on your screen?
No, I'm looking for the page that has the actual, actually, I am referring to a number that you gave, okay, excuse me, on page 133. 1,419,000, thank you, Supervisor. So there's that number, but that doesn't equate to a .3985 mil rate. So which number is the operational number?
So this is a one-year budget.
1 year.
Right.
This is year one of the facility being open, year three of the millage presumptively, if it takes 2 years to construct it.
I get that.
So this number, we also ran some inflationary adjustments, so we didn't assume that the budget to operate the facility would be 1.419 million per year. We did assume, I believe, 2% inflation, compounding over the 8 years. The first 2 years, we only assumed that we would do limited snow removal, limited groundskeeping. The interior of the building is likely to be finished after the exterior has been seeded and germinating. So we would have to take over some grounds costs, we would have to insure the building at some point, and we would have to pay heating and cooling costs. So we assumed a certain budget for years 1 and 2 during construction, and then for years 3 to 10, that's the assumption for year 3, but it's not the full model.
Well, that really doesn't make sense.
1.4 million times 10 would be 14 million and change.
So is this?
We're showing an operating budget of total over the 10 years of 12.6 million.
Okay, but page 133, is that year 1 or year 3?
Page 133, that is year 3.
Okay, so what's
the first year that the facility
Gotcha.
is open?
What will fall off in year 4 to reduce this number?
Nothing, that number will go up.
Okay.
What number are you comparing
Okay,
this
so
number to?
I'm comparing to the earlier number of .395 mils, which comes to a different number.
Oh, you're saying it doesn't generate 1.4 million in revenue?
Correct.
Yes, so we will, because we can't, right, we're levying that millage. In the first 2 years, we're going to kind of bank some of it because we will not have operating costs. When the foundation's going in, we will have almost no operational costs, right? So in year 1, all of the millage revenue will essentially be invested, we'll accrue interest on it, and we'll save it for years 3 through 10 to operate the facility.
But that begs the question of what's about year 11 through year 20. And I think you mentioned last time we're likely to have to go back for an additional millage to cover the years that don't have that surplus to start off with. Is that still your assumption?
It'll depend on how we handle the revenue that does come in, right? Because we've assumed no revenue. So if we levy this full millage, we will have some funding at the end of the 10 years. Or if we reduce the millage, over the course of time, as we see what the revenue generation is for the facility, it all depends on decisions that we make over the course of the first 10 years.
Getting back to collecting that operating revenue the first 2 years, is that even legal? If it's not open, can we legally collect our operating revenue for that?
Yes.
Is it ethical?
Yes. We'll have to start staffing up too at some point in year 2 when we're nearing opening, right? We're going to need staff who are hired and have cleared background checks and everything and are on staff to help us start to staff up and get all the equipment and supplies in order as well. So there will be a transition period in year 2 where we start to staff up in anticipation of the ribbon cutting.
Okay. I want to get a handle on the total cost again. If we're looking at an operating millage of .3985 for option 2, and then we're looking at an option 2 construction millage of .7055. Those are the two numbers. Are those two numbers to start with, correct?
Yeah, but the project bond millage rate changed ever so slightly due to the interest rate assumptions. So that is, for option 2, the project bond millage rate would be .7062.
Okay, so it's a little bit higher. If you add those up, you get a total millage of 1.105 mils. And if you multiply that times our taxable value, you get a number of about $2,649,000. Okay. So holding inflation the same, if you multiply that times 20 years, I come up with a number of 52,992,000 as being the cost, the millage cost for this over 20 years. Does that make sense to you?
So with a project bond, we cannot levy more than what we bond for and the cost to bond. So just like the Central Fire Station bond was retired early, and it was a reduced millage rate for that final year to pay down the final bonds, this will likely be paid off a year or two early, because if we're not conservative in the estimates with a bond millage, we won't be able to pay off and retire the bonds without digging into the general fund, right?
I get that.
So we're always ultra conservative. So the numbers, if you just multiply the millage rate with a project bond by the taxable value, you're going to arrive at a higher cost.
I get that. But this is the number in front of us, and this is what we're going to put on the ballot. Essentially a $52 million, almost $53 million millage increase. Is that correct? Which is the .395 mils plus the .7055 mils.
About 42 million.
And just to be clear, this is for option 2.
Option
only.
2.
Okay.
Okay. One last point, since I've got the floor. Regarding the kind of the way this information was presented to us, the process. On page 125, you highlight 2 millages that will not be on the December 25 tax bill, totaling .4 mils.
Page 125.
That's the
The
cat.
Cat Ready Ride and the senior millage. But you left out of this millage discussion the fact that the December tax bill will now have 3 relatively new millages on it from Ingham County. The health service millage of .63 mils, the homeless housing millage of .5 mils, and the elder care millage of .3 mils. That adds up to 1.43 mils. So our residents, this is before the senior center, comparing 23 to 25, are looking at a 1.03 mil increase rather than a 0.4 decrease. So if you're discussing taxes, I think you really got to look at the whole picture if we're going to make this decision. I know why you put just the one and not the other, but our residents don't get to pick and choose what millages they pay. They got to pay the county millage, they got to pay the township millage, they got to pay them all. So even before we have a discussion of the new senior center or community center millage, they're looking at a 1.03 millage increase. It's really, we need to be balanced in this and not just gear this or shift this towards a yes vote on this. And I would appreciate it if you had the total tax picture in here, not just the ones that came off, because those county millages are real and they're a big tax bite for our residents. Similarly, on page 132, you're including 0 revenue for the operations of the senior center or community center. I think that's the right approach. I believe some of the deficits that experienced in East Lansing, Portage, Farmington Hills, and even Howell is due to the overestimation of what the revenue would produce. But then 2 pages later, on page 134, you included what appears to be a factual table showing between 440,000 and 666,000 in potential revenue. I think these are aspirational. There's no market data. There's nothing to back up these numbers. They're just, this would be great if this happened. But there's really nothing to back them up in terms of a market research showing there's this kind of demand for, there's $666,000 worth of community space or recreation demand that will support this revenue. So you seem to want to have it both ways. We're not going to include any operational revenue, but here's some revenue, but wink, wink, we're probably going to get. It kind of makes me think that some of these numbers are squishy and you're signaling us here, well, don't worry about it if the numbers aren't exactly right. We got all this potential revenue coming. So, either leave out the revenue or defend the revenue. You seem to want to have it both ways. So here's our high estimates of what we think we could get, but we're not really counting them. it just isn't real clear. There's so much data here for us to consider. Having revenue in or out just confuses the matter, at least for me. Those are my two process questions that I thought could have been handled better.
Thank you, Treasurer DeShane. Trustee Wilson.
Deputy Opsimer, you put in no projections for revenue in the calculation for the millage, correct?
Correct. In terms of the millage rates, we're assuming that no revenue is coming in.
Correct. So, Phil, this is a table from a prior discussion, but we're not projecting any revenue coming into the project,
Treasurer
right?
DeShane.
I'm sorry, Treasurer DeShane.
I understand.
Okay.
My suggestion is if there's no projected revenue, leave out the table. By including it, it seems to be sending a mixed message here.
I just saw it as another tool that we could look at, but not included. Thank you, Treasurer. And thank you, Dan.
Okay. Other discussion? Trustee Lentz.
Thank you. You know, I think all of us here on the board have spent just about every single day and multiple times throughout the day over the past months thinking about this decision in front of us. And, you know, in doing so, and something I took great pride in was how many people I talked to while going out in the community, knocking doors, trying to win this seat here. And something that, while I so appreciate everyone who comes to these meetings, I know firsthand how, you know, much time it takes to be here and sit quietly as a member of the public and, you know, follow the rules of the township. I really tried over the past few weeks to talk to some of those individuals who I met while out knocking doors. I, you know, kind of kept logs as best I could for addresses, phone numbers where I could, and, you know, for sake of this conversation, let's call them working parents. I called about 20 to 30 of them over the past few weeks and, you know, really tried to get a sense of what they thought about this project. And while there are hundreds of pages and multiple hours of information about this, distilling it as best I could, you know, I heard from I would say the majority of those working parents that they want to see something that is meant for the entire community. With that said, I've talked to plenty of others, including a prominent building financial services individual who expressed extreme trepidation around this project, and of course to our multiple seniors who I've spent hours getting coffee and being on the phone with. I understand your concerns about the standalone senior center. I got to be honest, when I walked into this room tonight, I was still kind of on the fence as to what direction I was interested in going with this, but, you know, thinking about those hundreds of people who I did talk to over the summer who expressed, you know, great pride in this community and wanting to feel that there is a sense of place in addition to, you know, the great schools, the great parks. You know, a community center, I think, can do that. I would like to hear some more discussion, and I do have a couple questions, but I wanted to get that on the record and show my appreciation. Well, I won't name all those individuals, even though they did give me their permission to get their names. I won't name them, but I do want to thank those people who have spent about 10 hours over the past 3 weeks talking with me on the phone. I want to be a good public servant, and to those of you listening, both in the crowd and at home, thank you. You know, with that said, and going off of Treasurer DeShane's very real concerns about revenue projections, I am very compelled to agree that we can expect revenue around camps, gym membership, gym rentals, children's birthday parties is something I heard from multiple of those working parents. I'll call them that contingent. The meeting rooms, I'm a little unsure as to how exactly that revenue comes from. So, Director Wazinski, if you have some information, I'm just kind of curious, I know that you spent quite a bit of time talking to other communities with community centers. Excuse me. And I'm curious, did you get the sense that 65% meeting room usage is in line with those other communities? Do they have similar room sizes to ours? Like, do you feel that the meeting rooms in particular, the information presented on pages 134 and 135 is accurate to the best understanding of, to your best understanding for those communities?
It is very complex because we still don't know how many meeting rooms. So that was based on the community center, the combined senior community center on the original concept plans. I have talked to multiple different organizations, whether they be a senior center and or a senior community center. I've visited Farmington Hills, I've visited Hannah Community Center, and kind of just walk through and have them explain to me, how does this work? How often are these meetings room, booked? Who's using them? How long are they using them? And both Farmington and Hannah say almost every day their meeting rooms are used, and sometimes multiple times a day. So meeting rooms are something in this community that we're lacking. To your point, are the figures accurate? There's no way to say, but I do want to just convey that it wasn't looking just at, just putting a number to it, that I was looking at what the other communities might have. 65% was my best guess. We could even look at it at a 50%. You've got the numbers to be able to do that. But this is exactly why we don't want to commit to revenue being a part of the operating, because we just don't know yet. Another one I did review was I worked with the fire department, and Central Fire is rented out quite a bit. So I looked to see how often was that rented out, who's that rented out by. So I did do quite a bit of research, but it is very difficult to have an exact number. And hence why we want to be very conservative in what that revenue might be.
I understand.
I will also say, that's to community rooms, but the gym space is based off of our existing revenue we get for outdoor space and or what we are paying schools or whomever too. So those numbers are a bit more accurate.
Yeah. As a daily user of Town Road Park, I can attest to just how many people are there every single day using both baseball diamonds and the soccer field and filling up both parking lots. So I can, Meridian residents, we love our recreation. The other areas that I had questions about, if we were to go forward with a senior and community center of any kind, no matter what, there will be more than $1 coming in through that door. So can you walk me through, and maybe that might be Mr. Opsimer instead, the process with which residents could maybe expect to see, okay, we see all these meeting rooms being used. What is happening to my millage rates if we're, let's say $200,000 a year is being generated? When does that see representation?
The troops are coming.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Director Wazinski.
So we might actually all have some input here, and I can tell you that how I've looked at this since the question originally came up was that on an annual basis, the board has to set the millage rate as part of the budget process. And obviously, as part of the budget process, should this move forward, whether it's a senior center or senior community center, the Director Wazinski will have a whole nother budget to create every year, and that will be the budget for this facility, right? And so every year, we will be analyzing that revenue that comes in versus our projections versus the millage rate, and making a recommendation to the board as to, yes, continue to levy the entire millage rate, or no, this year, we believe, based on our projections, we can start to dial it back. And so that's how at least I anticipate it going. I don't know if the other directors have other input there.
That's exactly the point I was going to make, the budget process.
Thank you. So following that process, and I appreciate you getting this all on the record. I know we have a number of viewers online watching this as well. If we were to, God forbid, have something similar to COVID again, where we go from full, robust community center operating revenue. We have lowered a millage rate to kaput, we all have to stay home again. Can you walk me through, are we allowed to bring that millage rate back up to the original levying, or would that be stuck at its change rate?
No, it's.
So all township millages are levied on the winter tax bill. And so once the board adopts the budget and once the tax bills go out, that is final for that tax collection. But the following year, the board can move it back up.
Okay.
So, for instance, Treasurer DeShane referenced the health millage, the county health millage. That millage has been levied at less than the maximum. And the county at any given point in time could have levied it for the full amount. So millages are voluntary in that respect, but it's year to year. So once you commit to it for the winter tax bill, that's set in stone. We would only collect whatever the millage rate is that we put out on that tax bill. But the next year it could be adjusted back up to the max or anything between 0 and the max millage rate.
Thank you for that.
And subject to Headley rollback limitations as well.
Correct. Yep.
That was, yeah.
The operating millage, would likely get hit with a Headley rollback on an annual basis. The project bond millage rate would be exempt from Headley.
Gotcha. I appreciate how much work the staff has put into this and members of the citizen community. Mr. Magnozzi in the crowd serving as a member of that senior community center task force throughout the years. This has definitely been at the top of everyone's mind. And I just want to acknowledge that for residents who, have been asking for this for a while and have looked to the township board and our packets to see when exactly this started. I know that this was one of the very first things I heard about last year, so I want to commend everyone for that. That's where I'm at with my line of questions right now. I may have some follow-up, but I appreciate that walkthrough.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Other board members? Trustee Wilson.
So beyond the numbers, I think we have to look at what this is all about. Stand back and say, we're a prime community. We're a prime community because our voters have chosen to pay for many different things, including pathways and parks and farmers market and so on. And those are the things that make us a prime community. So when I stand back and I look at what is an amenity that we would like to bring forward to the community, we've been working on this for almost 2 years. This is not something that has just come up in the last few months. We've had 2 iterations of a task force. We've had meetings, multiple meetings with the public to take a look at what people want. We've talked to members of our community. And what is coming up to me is that there is encouragement for having a facility that addresses all ages, all abilities, but particularly that it meets the needs of all members of our community. And if we build a standalone senior center, that's not going to meet the needs of all of our community. So this board is not going to make the decision to have a senior and community center. The voters are. What this board is going to do is make a decision on what would fit the best needs of the community and then leave it up to the voters to decide whether this is a want that they want to have in our community. So given that, the option that I think is most viable is option 4A. And that is to have the opportunity to build something onto a senior and community center in the future. It doesn't lock us out of doing that. And it does meet the recreational needs and the meeting spaces, which are at a premium. And I know how difficult it is to have a relatively large meeting in this community. Meets those needs for people to gather and be in community. So I'm just going to throw out there option 4A and say that that is something I could support. It's smaller than what came out of the task force option, which is option 2. It's greater than doing a senior center only, which is option 1, and compromise is the name of the game. So those are my comments at this time. Thank you.
Clerk Demas.
I think in order to make any decision here, we need to have a tough conversation about the economy. I appreciate the new options presented here. I can see the effort to find a compromise, but I'm just still having a hard time justifying the extra costs of any concept that includes a community center. The amount our residents will be taxed as a direct result of a joint senior and community center is too much for this to be considered a financially responsible decision. We must take into consideration our residents, how much another tax increase will affect them, how much we will be burdening our residents. And if we go with a joint community senior center, what happens if the millage fails? Will we no longer have the option to create a new senior center, which is something we need? I'm afraid if this type of millage fails, this will punish our residents who would have been in favor of a standalone senior center millage. And if we don't have that option, as a result, we lose that opportunity for a new senior center. And we need to consider our residents who may not be able to afford such an expensive millage given the state of our economy. So I hope today we can talk about that. We can talk about how much this will affect our residents and if this even is financially responsible.
Other discussion? Trustee Trezise.
I've been listening and trying to weigh all sorts of ideas here. And I'm going to say something harsh. When it really comes down to it, the senior center is not a need. It is a want. There are a lot of communities that do not have a senior center. Having said that, I want it. I also want the community center. My problem with that is we're looking at a 20-year bond as opposed to a 10-year. We're looking at 2 or 3 times the operational cost. And with the economy the way it is, I'm not sure that that would pass. And that's where it comes down to. I'm just afraid that as much as I would like to see that happen, I'm not sure it could. And that's unfortunate because I think it would be a great gem for the township, but I don't know that the mood is out there to go that route at this point. I'm going to continue listening to other ideas, but that's where I am today.
Trustee Sunland.
Yeah, so I keep thinking, and I'm sure that this is not going to go across well with the community of the seniors, but I said something earlier, and I think I was thinking that why are we limiting, if we do only the smaller building, why are we limiting it to seniors? Why are we not including, why aren't we utilizing it as a community center on a smaller scale? That's kind of what I'm thinking as a compromise. I mean, you still could be dedicating most of the time to the seniors and having the availability, maybe first use availability to schedule their meetings in their rooms that they want. But I'm thinking, why would we underutilize what is a fairly large center and not restrict it? We shouldn't be restricting it to just use for seniors. That's kind of like what I'm thinking as a compromise instead of a huge gymnasium, because, well, I am a member of Planet Fitness, and I probably don't need to pay the fees as much as I am now because I am now over 65 years old. But I do have access to the YMCA, I have access to Planet Fitness, I have access to all these different avenues of exercise. I personally like to do my outdoor walking, and I have a gazelle in my basement, and I do that quite a bit. But I'm just thinking that, again, I think we should make sure that the seniors have a dedication to availability, but I think we should be utilizing a smaller space as a community center as another option.
Okay. Clerk Demas.
I want to add on to Trustee Sunland's point. I would be cautious to call it a community center. I think that it should be designated as a senior center, but I do see your perspective about utilizing it for community space. Perhaps after operational hours, it can be used for meeting space. I mean, we have a lot of board and commissions in the township, and we don't have a lot of meeting spaces because meetings happen at the same time, multiple times during the night. And so it would be nice to have a designated area that we can use. We could rent out and make sure to clean up afterwards to have a good compromise, while also having it just be a senior center.
Yep. Treasurer DeShane.
I really appreciate the comments being shared here. This is the kind of discussion we need to have on this. I also didn't start this way, but I do want to thank staff. You guys have put in endless hours in this project, all three of you. And Supervisor, you managed the first task force. Trustee Wilson, you managed the second one. Trustee Wilson managed the first one. All of you have put in countless hours in this. And I like the recent ideas thought that we can have a senior center, but we can use it after hours for other purposes. And it would solve one of the big needs we have with it. We're trying to solve with the community center, which is community space. We could create space in there that could be used after hours for meetings, larger meetings, and it would take the great relief off the libraries, whose rooms are often booked up, as well as the fire station community center. Getting back to Trustee Trezis's comment, he's onto something here, I believe, which is this is just the wrong time to propose a large tax increase. These really are uncertain economic times. I mean, we have a president who isn't even agreeing to follow the Constitution anymore. These insane tariffs that no economists agree with. Many of our residents work for MSU and they fear losing their jobs with the massive cut in federal spending. MSU president said on Monday, Michigan State will need to make hard decisions to adjust to its financial path amid the financial troubles due to cuts in higher education funding by the federal government, which are compounding the university's existing financial challenges. They've already cut $15 million. They've already taken out $15 million out of their endowment fund. I mean, universities like to grow endowment funds. MSU is already pulling out $15 million. And it doesn't matter, it does matter how much, but a large increase over $1 million, which it would take to support this, would just send the wrong message to our residents. They're really uncertain right now. A lot of us are. And to have an 8 to 10% increase in township taxes to pay for this is absolutely the wrong message to send. And Trustee Trezis is right. This could go down in August. It's going to be the only thing on the ballot. There's going to be a ton of focus on it. And if there are 500 yard signs out there that say vote no to the Meridian tax increase of $48 million, whatever the number is, those are going to be compelling. And then as a board, we don't look good for proposing this. I mean, by proposing it on the ballot, we're de facto endorsing it. We're saying this is a good idea and we're going to put it to the voters for your approval. But if we didn't think it was a good idea, we wouldn't even be putting it on the ballot. So our fingerprints are all over this. We can't say, oh, it's up to you now. If we put it on the ballot, we own it. Because we're saying this is something that you should vote for, or we wouldn't put it on the ballot. So this board has the goodwill of the township right now. They come to our meetings, they're polite, they're respectful, we have a wonderful community, and something like this could cause a fissure where we lose the trust of our voters by them voting down this senior community center millage and then being very suspicious of everything we do for the next 4 years. And I don't want to lose that trust. I think we have a compromise alternative of the smaller facility that we use for community purposes. But again, I appreciate everyone's comments tonight. These have been very, very thoughtful.
Yeah. I see two hands. I'm going to weigh in as I haven't yet. And I think everyone has had a moment. I want to take a moment to address a couple of the comments that were brought up at the beginning of the meeting during public comment. And of course, we do appreciate always hearing from our residents. The first being that this feels rushed. And it may feel that way from an outside perspective if you learned about it on WLNS in the last day or two.
That's right.
But the reality is that, as Trustee Wilson pointed out this earlier, this has been a multiple year-long engagement. I know a number of you in the audience have been actively involved in this process since the beginning, as have many of us up here. This was in my first goal-setting, discussion in 2022. This was amongst our top 5 goals that we put on there for 2023. So in my perspective, we've been working on this now for 2+ years. There was a task force. It met for months. And a proposal, as we all know, was put before us in August of 2024 at the Yonkers facility. It was, 1.2 mils or thereabouts, just under 1.2 mils. And the board decided that was more expensive than they were willing to take on. Totally reasonable, decision to make. But the objection seemed to be to the money. And so, as opposed to the concept of a community center. And so, as Treasurer DeShane mentions, we have a second task force that I assisted with. And that task force presented the two options, options 1 and 2 that we have this evening in front of us. And both of those options are scaled back from what was at the Yonkers facility already. And then, of course, over the last month, we've come up with a request for additionally scaled back options, which we see in options 3, 4, and 4B. Which, by the way, I asked for creative names, and now we got numbers. Small quibble, zebra plan, but what are we going to do? So all that to say, we've been at this for quite some time. And I'll take us back into the way back machine. The reason why we've been at this for so long is because the 2021 triennial survey that we did, our residents listed a community center as one of the top 3 things that they wanted. And when put before them again in 2024, it was again one of the top 3 things that our residents who responded to that survey, both in the scientific sample and in the online portion, the top 3 item that they said they wanted to see. And that's a scientific survey, and I'm not going to sit up here and defend statistics, but they tell us that this is accurate, and so I believe it. And so, there's a lot of discussion about needs versus wants. I understand that. This is something that our community has consistently said, time and time again, that they want. We are being incredibly conservative in the numbers that are being put before us. And I say that not in the actual cost total of this thing, but the fact that we are considering 0 revenue when we're working on this. Now, to Treasurer DeShane's point, when we look at the table, it is speculative, right? The revenue that's included in the table that's in our packet is speculation. It's informed speculation. We have our staff who we trust to put these things before us, as they do for every other project that our staff works on us with. There is some amount of professional guesswork that comes along with estimating some of these things. That includes the revenue that we find in our budget each and every year as well, right? They are projections, and sometimes we meet them and sometimes we don't. In this case, we've taken conservative to a whole new level and said we will have nothing. That building will stand empty and will never be rented for public use ever, which is simply not the way this is going to go down. It may be 65%, it may be 85%, it may be 15%, But the fact of the matter is that every dollar in revenue that comes in is one more dollar than we are projecting when we look at the millage rate here. And so there will be more money coming in than what we projected. That is a certainty. Okay? And so when we say, is the millage rate going to forever be 0.951 if we choose option 4A, for example, the answer is, why would it be? If we bring in revenue, we can, as a board, and I suspect boards future will reduce the millage rate to our residents, what they see. And that is, by the way, true of any of the options that are before us tonight where room rentals are a possibility. So I just want to make sure that we're bringing that to the fore as well. As Deputy Manager Officer and member of our public also mentioned, we did polling on this in 2024. And the polling showed that the community would support a millage of the size that we're considering for any of these options. And not consider it by what, election experts would be considered a small margin, right? It's 60-40 is a large margin for those who have, been watching political races. So I believe, based on that information, that the community would be supportive. Trustee Lentz brought up the working parent, and I fall into that category. I've got 2 kids, ages 7 and 4, and, I was telling someone that I don't know how it happened, but every kid in my kid's class had a birthday party over the last month. It's wild. We've been to like 12 in the last few weeks. And it's given me an opportunity to speak with a lot of people in my cohort, because, they ask, some of these parents, are relatively new to me, and so they ask, what do you do? And I tell them. And the first question they ask is, well, what's going on in the township? Right? Because they don't follow it, and I tell them about this project. And every single one of them has been excited at the possibility of a community center. Every single one of them. Some of them tell me stories about, oh, well, our HOA doesn't have any space in the township to meet, and so we meet at High Caliber Karting, which is great for our local business, but it's indicative of a massive problem in terms of what's available. Ask Tom Moore at Cattle what's going on in their meeting rooms, and he'll tell you that they're booked months in advance. And we're talking about 2 rooms, one in Hazlet and one in Okemos. Our fire station is booked constantly, to the point where if we want to have a listening session over there, we can't even book it. So I think there's a real, it's a crisis of meeting space, and I think we don't have a solution for it, but for something that we come up with. And lastly, for now anyway, I'll say that, it is what we're asking to do with any of these 5 options, is to put the option to the voters and allow them to have a final say on whether or not they believe this to be a good project or not. It is, in this way, a very democratic process that we are giving them the option. And they're giving them the option to say no, too. That's a possibility. That's a possibility that could happen with any of the 5 options that are on the table tonight. But at the end of the day, I believe it's in our best interest to say to the voters, we believe that you should tell us what you think about this. And that's what we'd be doing with any of the options here. If put to me to make a decision, I prefer option 4A. I think that is reasonably, the lowest cost while still allowing for the possibility of future expansion amongst the senior and community center options. But I'm happy to entertain, all the conversation that we have this evening and find out where we end up. I saw Trustee Sunland and then Trustee Wilson.
I'm just wondering, and this is probably a very silly question, I'm just wondering if we explored the option of utilizing because we were in an Okemos school area, meeting rooms, did we explore whether Okemos schools would be willing to also continue their relationship with us when they have their new facility and having a space there? I mean, I don't know, I'm sure this is probably an obvious question, but I'm not sure if we explored it.
Yes, we have.
We did.
Yeah, so a couple of different comments to that end. The first of which is Superintendent Hood from the Okemos Public Schools sat on the Senior and Community Center Task Force. It was intimately involved in all the conversations about the possible future of the senior center. We did explore a number of school locations, school properties, when we were considering what the township might move forward with, including Wardcliff, for example, as one of the sites that we were possibly considering. And he basically indicated that the school district was not willing to part with any of the facilities that they have for the purposes of moving forward with a senior and community center. Now, I don't know if there's a continued willingness to, house a senior center on school property moving forward. The seniors have been told one thing. I've heard other things as well. But that is a decision point that has not yet been totally crystallized. I think they would wait until they see what happens with any potential millage that's on the ballot before they continue forward with any options.
And just one more point, again, I'm kind of looking at it as, okay, so we got this whole senior center that's kind of intact in the building that we're proposing, and we're looking at shaving down some of the spaces here, but this is, it almost looks like to me, whether we're deciding whether we want gymnasiums or whether we don't want all those gymnasiums, in my perspective, because, maybe we can live without the gymnasiums and we can kind of, again, phase in the thought that this is our center here for Meridian Township. I don't know that we should be thinking about this center as senior versus community. I think we can blend those concepts. So that's my thinking on that.
Trustee Wilson.
So I have a question for staff related to the practicalities of having a senior center that operates dually as a community center, depending on the hours, for instance. It was my understanding that the senior center as presented to us is 15,000 square feet, but that includes hallways and other areas that don't count as space to be utilized. So that gets us down to, Tim, what's the number?
The total square footage is 20,493, but that's including mechanical and HVAC spaces, shared hallways. In terms of practical usable space, approximately 16,000 roughly.
It's 12. It's 11,540 in the current program. Total building area is 15,579 on.
Backed it out.
That version.
So 11,500 square feet?
Usable space, and that includes, sorry, I stepped away from the mic. That includes everything, vestibule, offices, bathrooms, storage space, yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify, this is the patio version that does not include the meeting room, the big meeting room, the walk-in kitchen, and all of that.
Correct.
So is the version that you just put up is option one?
That
is that is option one?
That is option one.
All right, so could you comment, any of you please, comment on which meeting spaces could be shared?
Yeah, we gotta try to zoom in on it.
Because there's going to be equipment in a couple of them.
It's a PowerPoint. Hold on really quick. No, it's fine. We'll go to the packet.
Realistically, it's that. It's theoretically that. Because these are all, that's the equipment. one before, I'm sorry, I went the wrong direction. Oh, this will work.
Page 138 in the
Yeah, this
packet.
will work. So realistically, you're talking about that space right there, and then if you scroll down just a little more, that multi-purpose 40 in the bottom middle there along the southwestern wall.
No, to the left,
That
that one.
So that's the space that's sort of the intended, that's the sort of flexible meeting space in the senior center design. And then sort of the activity lounge space is a more, intended to be a little more open space. Realistically, those are only the two areas you're gonna functionally be able to share in a senior-only facility, because your billiards and table tennis, we'll have billiards and table tennis in them. The wellness equipment room, the wellness room, wellness equipment, this is sort of the workout type facility. And then, this would require sort of programming. It's an open space, but it would, that's where we would turn to Director Wazinski in terms of how do you program that space to share it if that's the ideal.
And I just want to add to that, so that space, the current proposal that you have is from 9 to 4. So it's a 40-hour work week. So the operational cost to have extended hours is not built in.
Correct.
So just to clarify, before we move on from that point, because I do think this is important, and I'll point out that we are not, it would be incredibly unwise of us to try to attempt to amend the millage language or rates on the fly here in the meeting. But so that we are clear, if we attempted to build option 1 or move forward with option 1, we would be doing so knowing that we are not staffed at a level that we could operate this facility for a joint senior and community center use, because the staffing is limited to 40 hours, and we're expecting 9 to 4, 9 to 5, thereabouts. And so any after-hours use is unbudgeted for if we choose to move forward with this, and would have to come out of likely general fund dollars in order to fund it. So when we're talking about the folks on this panel who are concerned about, a center being underwater from the day it begins, trying to use this option 1 as a joint senior and community center would put us in that position. Is that an accurate statement?
I would concur.
Okay.
Unless we amend. So practically speaking, you would be adding a 1,300 square foot space that could be shared in the wellness open, an 852 square foot space in the multipurpose small room, and then potentially the larger, in the drawing that you just showed us, we still have the multipurpose room in there that holds 120 people. No, we do not.
It's an outdoor deck.
So to be clear, this wellness open is open space. It's not walled, right? So it's not really great meeting space, this wellness open here. But we would still have the multi-purpose, and this activity lounge could possibly be a housing space for community meeting space, but the operation cost proposed does not include that.
Does not include it.
Can you scroll down to page 140, please?
Yes.
So to clarify, I think to Trustee Wilson's question, the room in orange that's about center screen there, the multipurpose room, would not be included in option 1.
Correct.
Okay.
And just from a practical standpoint, again, even though the idea of having a combination in a smaller space, it doesn't serve a purpose, because you don't have access to anything more than 2 small meeting rooms for after hours. That is not a community center, in my mind.
And I do feel it prudent to point out, and I think Trustee Sullivan knew this as well, which is that the input that the Senior and Community Center Task Force received for months from the senior center users and the advisory board was that there was absolutely no appetite, and in fact, emphatic opposition to using the senior center as a community center as well. And that was made quite clear to us along the way throughout that entire process. Now, the board's welcome to do whatever they want with that information, but that was what was very clearly presented to us. Trustee Sunland, then Treasurer
But
DeShane.
I'm just wondering, okay, we're saying, oh, well, we didn't plan for this, Well, I'm looking at the design, and it's like, there is a multi-purpose room with the combined center. It's a space that we were gonna use as a patio. I'm just wondering about stuff like that. Like, why are we doing a patio, a huge patio, when we could be utilizing that space to do a perhaps combined community senior center? And the thing is that, yes, the seniors are very adamant about they do not want, they want their senior center. But the fact is that if this goes to vote, they could possibly be losing their community and senior center entirely. So where does that leave them? I mean, it leaves them empty-handed anyway. So I was just trying to think of how can we kind of combine some of these concepts in order to have the meeting space available and have and still have the ability to book rooms. You could probably book a senior activity, seniors only for this day, I don't know. I just think that if we think harder about this, we can come up with a solution. But unfortunately, if we go to vote on this, it's like senior center or community center. We've got a dichotomy going that I'm not comfortable with. Anyway.
Thank you.
But it's not about me. I mean, it is about me. It's about the whole community. But I'm not comfortable with just an either or, the senior or the community. I think there's something that we could work on that fits, some of all the needs on a smaller scale. I think that's the part of the problem is that we're proposing something twice the size, and to me, in my opinion, it's going to be gym space, empty gym space that we're looking at. So I'm thinking, let's do the multi-purpose room and, get rid of that huge patio area that we were looking at and use the space, but maybe just keep it on a smaller scale. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Treasurer DeShane.
Dan, would you go back to picture 4A, 4B? If you look on page 120, this 4A, 4B represents a 25% decrease in the cost from 24.6 to 18.3. I think it's a bad deal. I mean, you're losing half the space, looks like. If we're going to build a community center, don't do it halfway this way. It would probably cost another $18 million to add that space on in 5 years. That's just my thought. Now if you'd go back to the option A.
Option one.
The option one. There would be some cost to take that awning area, turn it into a community space. This is why we have a reserve fund. We came up with $3.2 million 5 years ago to redo the HVAC here. We came up with another $1.2 million to redo the refresh town hall. We have reserve funds for special purposes, and one of them could be to turn that awning space with a couple $1 million into a community space. As for the seniors supporting this, Ms. Kelly, who's done great work on this, has told us that the senior advisory board doesn't support any of these proposals. They don't have any skin in this game here. They're saying none of these proposals meet their criteria. So we're on our own in terms of the seniors. I think option one is the proposal that I think there's a majority of the voters, majority of the board will support. So I'm going to move the option one project bond. I move to adopt the resolution authorizing the ballot proposal for the senior center. Excuse me, I jumped ahead. I am moved to adopt the resolution authorizing the ballot proposal for a 10-year senior center operating millage and to submit the question to the voters an election to be held on August 5th, 2025.
We have a motion that's been made by Treasurer DeShane. Do we have a support?
Support.
Supported by Clerk Demas. Further discussion? Treasurer DeShane, do you want to speak to your motion?
I spoke to it earlier. I think it's the least, involves the least amount of taxes. That's the most prudent thing to do. It meets our need to replace the senior center. Any additional funding besides the $10 million it's going to cost, half of which will come from the state, we will need to find ourselves and not go to the voters for. I think it's the prudent decision.
Okay, Clerk Demas?
Yeah. I would like to speak generally about some of the discussion that has been had today. I think we do need to be united as a board and recognize that the senior center space cannot function additionally as a community center. I think that it can be used for community space if that is the avenue we would like to go with, but I don't think that we should argue to create that small space for option one as a joint senior community center. We can explore building a community center in the future if we do go with this option. When we are in a more economically stable place, I understand that there are concerns with costs rising, but what happens if this millage fails if we go with a joint community senior center? Will we lose that $5 million grant? Would all the work the township has put into this project be for nothing? I want to recognize how much work that has been put into this, into considering the senior and or community center. I know that this has been a 2-year process with multiple senior and or community task forces. And with that, I feel the need to speak on this item from a clerk's perspective, because too often the work the clerk's office does is ignored in these conversations. It doesn't sit right to me that we only just began discussing a potential millage in April as a newly elected board. A millage that would go on the August ballot, and the clerk's office, my office, has a responsibility to inform voters about upcoming elections, but it's now May 8th and my staff still don't know if we're going to have an August election for the senior and or community center. And while August may seem like a long ways away, as I mentioned at the previous meeting, the deadline for ballot language to be approved is May 13th at 4 p.m. And that's this upcoming Tuesday. One main reason why these deadlines are in place is so that we can have plenty of time to properly prepare for an election and inform our voters. And while we do have residents who are aware of the decision that we're making tonight, I know that there are plenty of residents who feel that this process has not been made transparent enough. And we heard that during public comment. We want our residents to be informed, and we have a responsibility to communicate effectively to our constituents. It doesn't feel like we're giving this topic justice by only having a month to discuss this in 3 board meetings. And when it's placed on the action item, we have now 4 options or 5 options to discuss. That was not provided to us during the first meeting that we discussed this item. That being said, my hope in saying all of this is that we as the board will learn from this experience, and so that in the future we can have enough time to make an informed decision, because that's the way it should be done. And while it would be nice to have more time to properly discuss this item, we're going to need to make a decision tonight. And I urge the board to make the best decision for our community. We need to listen to our constituents and go with the more responsible option. And that's why I support a standalone senior center proposal. It just makes sense.
Okay. Other discussion? Let me, if I could, respond just a little bit here. I listened intently to our public comment, and maybe I misremembered something that was said. I don't recall transparency being of as much of a concern from the public this evening. But I will say that we took great strides, especially in the follow-up to the first proposal that came before us in 20, I know you weren't on the board at that time, to make sure that the second iteration of the task force was very transparent. We had public meetings. Many of the folks who are here tonight were present at many of those. And all along, we said that the goal is to present options to the board in March for discussion in April, for decision in May, to place on the August ballot. I have great respect for the work that the clerk's office does. I work in a clerk's office myself. And so, you know, we too are seated on the edge of our seats, waiting to find out whether or not we have an election in August and how big and how expansive. But we also listen to the county commission, for example, the ones that we interact with all the time, and we know where they're at in terms of whether or not they're going to move. So I'm surprised to find out that the staff is surprised by this. Now, you mentioned the options. The options that were presented, the additional options, were the direct result of a request from this board to explore additional choices other than the two that were presented at our last meeting, or I guess 2 meetings ago, so a full month ago. And so, I don't want to diminish the work of staff to, present us with what the board had asked for in our first two discussions. And so, I don't find that objectionable at all, because that is what we asked for. Now, to the motion at hand, I do have some serious concerns if there is an intent to use the senior center that's being presented as a senior and community center, partly because of the concerns that we heard from our senior our senior center users throughout the entirety of this 2-year process, but also the operational concerns of having to pay for a day and night community center or senior center when we are explicitly in the resolutions that are being considered looking at operations cost for a day-only senior center. I may disagree with Treasurer DeShane on a number of points along the way of this discussion and debate, but the one thing I don't disagree with is we shouldn't set ourselves up for failure. And the motion, if the intent is to do that, to have the center open after hours for meetings and for other uses, puts us in a position where we are set up to fail financially. And I have grave concerns about doing that. I also have concerns with the back of the napkin suggestion that we drain our fund that we had set aside without knowing how much it costs to tack on additional meeting space to an existing proposal. We don't know. We could probably find some idea of what it is, but if you're complaining about the numbers that were presented in the packet, this is even more gray, because we don't know, besides a back of the napkin calculation, what it would cost to add that meeting room onto this center. So I came prepared to, vote on any of the 5 options this evening, but I thought it was explicitly made clear to us as a vehement recommendation from staff that we should not alter any of the language or any of the proposals that are brought before us, on the fly here at this meeting. And I'm concerned that we're considering doing so. Treasurer DeShane.
May I speak to your concerns? My motion did not include any discussion of using it as a senior center community center. I am proposing it as a senior center. That's what my motion proposes. We've had a broader discussion of possible after-hours uses of that. And my discussion of finding funding for it, should this board at a future date decide to do that, was meant to be just that we have options. What I am proposing today is option 1 for a senior center, as outlined in this proposal, nothing more. So you're confusing my discussion that we have flexibility about the space with my motion, which is that we approve option 1 as proposed by staff. That's my only motion. No amendments, no changes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Clerk Demas.
I would like to respond to some of your comments, Supervisor. When you were talking about transparency, from my interpretation of public comment, when I view transparency, I view it as us as a board, as people being able to best inform the people that we represent of the discussion and decisions that we are going to make and are making. When I hear that residents feel that this decision has been rushed, that there has not been enough time to discuss this topic, as we have only started talking about this decision in April as a new board, I don't feel like that is transparent to our residents, and I don't think that's responsible as well. If you would like to interpret that as a different word, I would be open to amending what I have said, but I think that it's important for us to make sure that we inform our residents. So whether you want to call it transparency or just information, that is just my stance, and that is what I wanted to communicate here today. When talking about my staff are not surprised about this decision. We've had numerous staff meetings, and we are always prepared for an election. I'm not speaking on behalf of my staff, I'm speaking as the clerk, and I am disappointed that we have waited until May 8th to make this decision, as I don't think it's responsible to our voters.
Other discussion. Trustee Lentz.
Yeah. I appreciate the back and forth of everyone here, including the proposal to try to use a senior center as a combined center as much as I can, or as much as we can. You know, in my my day job, I work as a nonprofit fundraiser. I think a lot about, what I can control and what I can't control. If it were up to me, there would be no childhood hunger. There would be no need for an addiction recovery facility in mid-Michigan. There would be no need for a homelessness shelter, but there are. And that is to say, I don't want to have the direct control of what I say tonight is what is levied on the taxpayers of Meridian Township, which is why we are voting on whether or not to put this on the ballot. In my conversations with many of the residents of Meridian Township, they express interest in a sense of community, a sense of feeling like this is a place where they belong, where they have a say in what goes on with their dollars. I genuinely am so worried that if we put a senior center only option on the ballot, some of our residents, which have expressed concerns about the feeling of the township not being for them, those working parents that both Scott and I have mentioned, will feel that they're not being represented by their community. As someone who is not a parent, and I give Scott all the credit in the world, I don't know how he manages what he does. Not all of them have the ability to come to these meetings and speak out. And I've made it my mission, I think, since our first retreat, shortly after being elected, that I was interested in hearing from as many different kinds of residents as possible. A community center, I think, is a better option than a private gym for many uses. We want our children to have recreation. We want our seniors to have the sense of community that comes with a community center. And as Director Wazinski points out, and our supervisor points out, a meeting space is something that the community can all have a stake in, and something that seems to be needed. With that, at various points throughout the year, I would have been voting in support of Treasurer Deshane's motion here tonight. But with that said, I am more interested in option 4A, putting this before the voters so that they can decide for themselves if this is something that they want to see in their community, if they want to see this as a crown jewel of their community, a place to come together, and yes, a place that comes with the financial responsibility, but that is not only our responsibility, that is not only in our control, that I believe should be in the control of all residents. And with that, I'm planning on supporting option 4A, but no matter what this board moves forward with, I am excited to see something built that we can be proud of and serve our residents.
Mr. Trezise.
I've been torn on this. I do not like the concept of the senior-only center. And looking at the numbers, I'm not sure we can afford the community center. And I don't believe this facility at that size can be both. I don't think it'll be a suitable senior center if it's being restricted so that someone else can use it part of the day at night and the added costs that you mentioned. But I don't think it's a functioning community center if all we have is a couple of meeting rooms that can only be used after 4:30 in a day. A lot of meetings occur during the day, and this doesn't solve that problem. I don't like the cost of the senior center, community center joint. On the other hand, I do believe it's up to the public to decide whether they want it. And so I will probably vote against the senior center alone, and I would support 4A. That's brought up. It's not an easy decision to me because there's financial impacts and there's also utilization impacts. And I believe there's a better chance of having something that serves all the community if we do the combination. So I've been struggling back and forth all night on that.
Treasurer DeShane.
Back to page 127, just to go over the numbers again. Senior center over 10 years will cost $236,000, $400,000. Leave inflation constant, that would be around $470,000. I'm sorry, over 20 years, that'd be about $4.7 million. The construction costs, a 10-year millage is about $4.8 million, so we're safely under $10 million cost for a senior-only center. Senior community center with the numbers here, it's a 1.105 millage, which equates to nearly $53 million for a senior community center. These numbers, I can show you these numbers all night. We're not going to take the time to break it out with the spreadsheet, but I assure you these numbers come up to $53 million. So we're looking at 5 times the cost for this senior center, community center. With the 4B, you get half the space for 4.5 times. It's not a good bargain either way. These are tough times. This is no time to propose a $50 million tax increase for our voters. It sends the wrong message, and I risk the board voting for this, losing the support and the goodwill of our community. We've got it now. We should not squander it. Thank you.
Clerk Davis.
I had a question, and I think this is actually my third time asking this, but maybe it came off as rhetorical. What happens if this millage fails for a joint senior and community center? What do we do going forward? Will we lose that grant?
Presumably, if a millage, hypothetical, right? Hypothetically, if the millage did fail, I imagine we would first reconvene administration and board, perhaps bring an agenda item forward. One option that we would have at our disposal, but there's no guarantee with this option, is we can always ask our lawmakers to try to amend the state budget. Now, keep in mind, we secured the $5 million grant with one-party control in state government. There is no longer one-party control. That does make things more volatile, and amending a state budget to revisit one grant is a tall task and a significant ask. But that is one option that we could explore. To keep the 5 million, perhaps for an entirely different purpose. Something where it would be a one-time expenditure, like we invested our ARPA funds in, right? We purchased windscreens for the marketplace. We invested in the local roads program. We purchased the automatic cots for our EMTs and firefighters, things like that, right? So that's one option, but there's no guarantee. It would be up to both chambers of the House and Senate and the governor to acquiesce that, which is a pretty tall task.
And then would there be a possibility to have a standalone senior center if this millage fails for a joint?
Yeah. I mean, you see the financial costs, right? So you back out the 5 million, because presumably we lose that grant, but we could still pursue a senior-only center through a millage. You can see that it costs, it would cost a little bit over a third of a mil, right? Because we're at a third of a mil right now. Take the 5 million out. It might be 0.35, 0.36 mils to go after a senior-only option with no grant.
My last question. So I want to work together as a board. So I guess I would ask board members who would not be as in favor of a standalone senior center. Is one of the reasons why you would be supportive of this joint community senior center option at a reduced size is because it would give voters or residents more of an opportunity to decide if they do want a community center. Is that what I'm understanding here?
Yeah.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. Does anyone want to speak more on that? Because I think that would be helpful from a clerk's perspective to understand that standpoint.
Yeah. I will speak to that. I want to ask one additional question about the fallout should something not pass. Theoretically, there is a window of time between when the election in August happens and when ballot certification is required for the November election. And theoretically, we could put something on the November ballot, could we not? And if it was a project that we had more or less gotten to the point that we are at right now, I guess I'll put the question first and then we'll back out into the how. Is it possible to put something on the ballot in November and still achieve the goal of spending the money by the deadline that we must to maintain the grant?
Director Schmidt and I will both kind of join forces and answer this. My first instinct is we would likely have to invest in final design, right? These are concept plans, so it's to scale, but it's not a full design. We don't have CAD files for everything. We have no mechanical, we have no electrical, no plumbing, et cetera. So we might have to invest in the design leading up to it, not knowing whether or not passage on a November ballot is going to occur. And if it didn't occur right, then we might lose, we'd have to eat those costs, right? Right now, those costs are coming out of the $5 million grant. So presumably it wouldn't be a township expense in the end for design. But that's my initial thought on that hypothetical, right? So I believe the hypothetical is August is perhaps 4A. It fails, then November might be option 1 for a senior only. November's a lot easier if it's senior only because design shrinks, so time does reduce. But then again, Director Schmidt's, I'll let him take the mic, but when you do shrink the facility, some things do get a little bit more complex in terms of fitting everything in. So sometimes size can work against us too.
I mean, I think it's going to be tight. Candidly, it's going to be tight even with the August ballot. But I think with the benefit of the August ballot is that, at least in my head, we're probably coming to the board even in advance of the vote with the discussion, lining everything up to have it ready to go. If, to Deputy Manager Opsmer's point, that's probably the path we have to take, is pivot to design immediately. I hesitate to shrink the schedule too much on the design, but I mean, your design probably shrinks enough that you get it done this year. The question is going to be whether we can actually get in the ground, because that's going to be really one of your big problems is, can we actually start digging this year, or are we put off until April of next year, May of next year, depending on what Mother Nature does. And so that is candidly my biggest concern, is losing that essentially 3-month period there, where if we can get design done and have it out to bid, or at least have footings out to bid and get the footings in the ground still this year, then start setting steel, versus, okay, maybe we get the design done, but then we have to wait for November to make sure we're going, because we're really not spending the hard money until after one of the millages passes. It's not that it's not doable. It becomes a much more challenging endeavor with the November ballot. I think we can still probably do it. We're gonna be moving quick. We're moving real quick.
Another big caveat that I'm going to put on all of that is, if we had a contractor hypothetically, who, our general contractor who was going to build this facility here tonight, they would caution you extremely on the supply chain and the time that it takes to acquire, especially the steel that's going to go into the structure of this building. We are waiting 12 to 14 months for generators. We have seen some construction products accelerate in terms of availability, but there are still 12-month holding patterns to acquire certain material. So and you have to understand, right, we don't have the prime contractor or the general contractor until we go out to bid. So even if we're talking about a November ballot, we have it designed before the election, we go out to bid within weeks of it after, we might find out on November 15th that we can't get the steel until July. That is entirely conceivable. It could be even beyond July. So not having the general contractor, and we would also have to take a very hard look at how you even put it out to bid, because we would have to give procurement schedules. And we would have to have liquidated damages where we impose penalties for certain deadlines not being met. Contractors will escalate cost as a result. So the more you require them to meet certain benchmarks on certain timelines, the more cost escalates. So I guess the long and short of it is, November would be exceedingly precarious.
I would also just add that one other thing is, Director Massey and I have kept the state informed as to where we're at in their process, and they understand that we've gone through an iterative process here and are really trying to get to a consensus type project. And they are expecting us to have an answer in August and start spending money. If we were to push off November, we're going to have to request some grace from them with a commitment of how we're going to spend it, because I think they're a little antsy about redeploying those funds so they don't lose them.
Treasurer DeShane.
I think we're missing the third option, which is what Williamston did, which is to purchase an existing commercial space, rehab it, use the $5 million for that. It doesn't cover the operation cost, and we need to have a budget amendment to cover that in the 26 budget. But it's not as if there isn't vacant commercial space in Meridian Township. There's plenty of it. Why wouldn't that be a third option?
So we've analyzed vacant commercial space. There's not an option available to us for purchase. The state does not love the idea of a lease, and I talked to Manager Dempsey about this, that we'd have to structure some sort of ultra long-term lease where it essentially acts as a purchase, like a 50-year or 99-year ground lease type setup. I think I had a thought here and I lost it. I apologize. The issue that I have with the Williamston comparison is that project's underwater. It's been underwater from the start because they didn't have enough money to get it going. So to do it, we would have to find a space that we could get at a price that would allow us to still build it out. And given construction costs nowadays, the $5 million could get eaten up very quickly in a build out of an existing space. as we found with the Yonkers facility, build out of an existing space is always more expensive generally because you have to work around the existing stuff.
Correct, I'm not saying it's easy, but
Yeah.
I'm saying with the right commitment to doing it, we could get that done in the 13 months we'd have between the August election and September 30th of 2026.
The one thing I would caution, if I recall correctly, because we used, when we made an offer to the owner of the driving range on Grand River, Buddy's Pizza was one of our comps, and I believe it was purchased for 1.8 million and change. It's always going to be more cost effective for us to build at the central fire station site because we don't have $2 million in land acquisition. The other difference between Williamston and Meridian Township is the average daily traffic volume that we have on our roads is significantly higher, and that drives the market value of the property up. So to get anything on Grand River or anything in central Meridian, you know, the land acquisition and/or the building acquisition cost, if we're purchasing, is going to make that project more expensive than anything that we do on the central fire site.
I concur. We have to get creative and we'll replace it. We may not have the central location, but there is commercial space out there. I'm just saying, if it passes in August or fails, if it gets defeated in August, we don't have to just turn the $5 million over. We can do something with that money to create a senior center. It's not like, the only option is to build. We do have other options. We'll have to look at those at the time. That's my point.
Conceivably, yeah. We have until September 30th, 2026 to come up with any kind of plan, but we have to spend it by that date.
Correct.
Trustee Lance.
This is maybe more intergovernmental than we can answer here tonight, but if, let's say we move forward with 4A, it does not pass, that $5 million sitting there in front of us. Is there some relationship we could explore with Okemos schools along the lines of using our $5 million to add on to their new facility? I haven't, okay.
We did explore that.
Okay.
It's not a viable option.
You can't do it.
Thank you. Okay.
Treasurer DeShane.
As the 4 board members have expressed their non-support for my motion, I would like to withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Would you agree to withdraw your second?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I withdraw the motion.
Okay, the motion is considered withdrawn. I think at this point, you know, I know that there is a division amongst board members here about obviously what to do. And it hasn't fallen on deaf ears. Treasurer DeShane's interest in, trying to find a unified path forward. And I believe that a 4-3 vote is a challenge. We as a board make a commitment to support, the board's decisions that we make. I think that's fallen on both sides of the issues that we've disagreed on. Understanding that there may yet be some way forward, however precarious, I'd ask my colleagues who, had initially supported option 1, would you consider option 4A if the understanding is that we will attempt to pursue some other version of a standalone senior center if the voters choose not to support the question that we put before them? Clerk Demas.
I'm open to it, but I would like to go back to my question and ask more of the reasoning behind support for 4A. I would be open to it, but I need to better understand how that is advantageous to our residents and our voters. Is it providing more of an option for them to decide if they want a community center? I think that was general consensus here.
Sorry, yeah, I did say I would work on that, but I think Trustee Trezise was also speaking to that.
My reasoning is it serves more of the community. It is more expensive than I hoped, but I think it serves the community as a whole as opposed to a minority of the community who are going to assume or who would want a standalone exclusive senior center, which we're asking the entire community to support. And that's my reasoning. I don't like the cost, but I don't like the limitations on one. So I just weighed those back and forth, and I would come out. By having a senior center alone is limited, and 4A it's broader. So if the community wants to support a combined senior center, community center, I think they should have the option.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, as someone who doesn't yet meet the criteria of a senior center, you know, people of my cohort who make up a decent percentage of the community as well as those who are younger than me, would not feel welcome in a senior center. It's not for us, and we would be left as voters, and, you know, vote every election. As voters, we'd be left asking, okay, outside of the broader, you know, value-based community good of we should have a senior center, you know, selfishly, what's in it for me, right? What's in it for me, the voter, right? Not me, Scott Henderson, me, the voter. And I think that, you know, people are going to evaluate this based on how it will impact them and whether or not they are actually receiving any benefit from having it, right? Someone who's in their 30s will have to wait 30 years before they could even set foot inside a senior center. Someone with kids can take their kids to the gym on day one of a community center being open, or can use the rooms for a meeting that they are, you know, a part of on day one in a community center environment. And so I think that, you know, this is, and has always been in my mind, not an expense, but an asset that we are offering to our residents. And I think that a community center is an asset to all of our residents, as opposed to a senior center, which is an asset to just those who meet a very specific set of criteria. So that, to me, is part of why I am supportive of a community center option, and have been for a while. Trustee Sunland.
Wow, I just think we're getting too much into the fact that, oh, it's only a senior center. Oh, we can only have seniors go there. I think we need to kind of change our thinking on that, because, you know, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking, well, you know, everybody could go, but it's kind of for the seniors. I didn't realize I was totally just voting on whether I want a senior or a community center, because the community center has a bill that's twice the sum, and I wanted to be more conservative. Now, I meet the criteria for a senior, but that's not where I was coming from. That's not what my thinking was. I think we need to look at combining, and I know I've heard other people say tonight, but I think we need to look at combining for half the cost, the community and senior center, and have space, and we could build on in the future. I think it's not fiscally responsible to spend, you know, $48,000 or $35,000 versus $14,000. You know, I'm thinking about it from a monetary perspective, and I'm not confident that we're going to be able to get people signing up and getting revenue in. I think that space is going to go stand vacant. That's my perspective, unless we employ somebody full-time to make it happen. So then that adds another cost on staff to get people to man it. I mean, we're not even talking about manning the operation.
No, we are.
We are?
That's included in the operations cost of the building.
Okay, okay.
In every one of these plans, the yellow side of that chart is the personnel to staff the building.
Yeah, I feel like I'm voting more for, not a senior standalone center versus a community center, because that is a division that, you can't really win. I'm thinking that we just need to scale down and make it a community senior center and just scale down a bit and maybe look at future, but I think we should combine the concepts.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
Thank you. Treasurer DeShane, do you want to add anything?
No, I've said what I would wish to say about this. In terms of your question?
Yeah.
Oh, the question of, can I support this as a unified board? Well, the board did not seem very unified on this senior-only question. So it seemed a little bit hypocritical to ask me to support the proposal that I didn't propose. No, I really cannot vote for this. We got hammered 2 hours ago by our residents telling us what a terrible idea this is. And it's going to create a lot of noise in the community. And I think it's important for board members that don't support this tax increase in this very difficult economic time to speak up against it. That's the first reason. It's the wrong time for a tax increase. The second is this 4B is a terrible proposal. You're giving half the space, basically. 4A. It's a terrible proposal. It's half the space for 75% of the cost. You're losing half the gym, you're using the youth space, you're using Dan, would you put it back up, please? 4A, the picture of it. It's still going to cost, with the operations, $44 million over 20 years. And you can see the activity room goes away, the youth recreation room goes away, and the gym goes away. And it's still costing $44 million over 20 years. If you're going to vote for a community center, I'd go back to the original one. At least you're getting a better bang for your buck. This is a compromise that, even if it passes, you lose because you got half of a community center. It really is I appreciate the effort on Trustee Wilson and others to bring forward a compromise, but I think your trade-off on this is terrible because you're losing half the gym, you're losing the youth area, you're losing a big community space. It just doesn't appeal to me. Even if I was for a community center, I wouldn't be for this because this is a community center for a community of 20,000 people, not for a community our size.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your candor.
You're welcome.
Trustee Wilson.
I just have a couple of comments. One is that if we go with option one, the only space that can be shared at the cost of having additional personnel available for additional hours a day are 2 rooms. That's all we get because there isn't a multi-purpose room. There's a patio that could be shared. But we've heard in prior conversations that the seniors don't even want a patio.
Well, right, we should listen.
So, and I will say our audience tonight has been all seniors. We haven't, because of the constraints of work and kids and putting dinner on the table and going to sports events and so on, we're not hearing from everyone in our community. And our surveys have shown that that the majority of people would like to see a community center. And this one would incorporate a senior center. So it would give us a lot more meeting space. It would give us the opportunity to use the multipurpose room for revenue generation because it will have amenities like the warming kitchen that would make it an attractive place to be. And takes away the patio, which is in option one, and does give us gym space. So, and the amenities that go along with that. So that's why this seems like what the community has asked us for. And we put the question to our voters. And our voters can decide, these are amenities that we don't have at this time. Do they want this? And give them a chance to speak up. Everybody, every voter, and every age band. Thank you.
Clerk Davis.
I
Yes, I would like to share my perspective so far, and why I'm struggling to fully support any concept with a community center. And I'll share it from a young person's perspective. I would like a community center. I would use it. But I mean, if you asked me that like 6 months ago, yeah, I would vote in favor. But we are living in very uncertain times. And yes, I will be bringing up the economy again, because we have to consider how much this millage would cost. And if I saw this on the ballot, I don't know how I would feel for the board to make that decision to put on, or to present such an expensive millage for us. I don't know if I would be in support of it, despite how much I would like a community center. I don't think it's worth it for the cost. And I think that there are alternative routes that I would explore at least. I mean, I graduated over a year ago and recently entered the workforce. I want to settle down here and build a life. And I'm working every day to support myself and my family. And I know a lot of people can relate to that. And they have their own experiences, which we all have to consider when thinking about whether we would be able to financially support a community center. I do think that 4A is a better alternative than a full-on joint community senior center. But I still view a community center as a luxury and not something that we can afford in this economy. I would be open to letting voters decide on that because I'm only one person, but I've listened to people in our community and just listening to our constituents, I haven't heard enough support recently to justify taxing our residents this expensive millage. I would also want to hear from Trustee Lent's perspective because I know you also did some outreach, and the outreach that you did, you received some different feedback than I received. So I would like to understand your perspective in support of 4A, and also just listening to residents as well, if you would like to speak on that.
No, I appreciate that. You know, I'll put the title "Working Parents" as the name of the group. Not all of them necessarily fit into Scott's two young children going to birthday parties every weekend demographic, but you know, no, I probably, of the folks that you can describe as working parents, I probably talked to 10 to 15 over the past few weeks. Again, folks that I had talked to on the doors, you know, Okemos school teacher who specifically said, yes, we have a lot of parks and trails, which are great for me, but my 8-year-old doesn't want to go on a trail. They want to be in a club sport. I don't want to be anywhere near a club sport. As me, myself, I want those trails, but the ability to have that option. So, you know, an Okemos school teacher who, you know, lives, works, and is very much arguably the picture of this community, raising a family here. Some residents in Hazlet who, similar to what Supervisor Hendrickson said, young parents looking for birthday options. You know, to have that, to be able to use those meeting spaces for that purpose was something that genuinely very much excited them. You know, I will keep their names out of this because this is a long meeting, but, you know, one of the individuals I spoke to is a very prominent member of a nonprofit dedicated to schools and children. She is constantly thinking about, you know, how to make the lives of schools and children better and increase their education. And, you know, one of the conversation topics she talked about was feeling a sense of belonging. I'm not saying that one community center in one township is going to solve all these issues, but she was excited about it. I am a big believer in trusting those who, you know, have a different perspective, know more than you. I ask Dan more questions each week than I can count because I trust his expertise. I would trust this individual because of her experience as a mother in the community who has young children. You know, when it comes to community meeting space, while I don't personally have a need to bring 200 friends and family together. I know that there's a lot of, clubs and groups, pottery groups, citizens who just want to come together, especially during our not great weathered winters. We had our first real winter in a long time, and shutting down all activities that relate to outside, every winter. And this is an option for it. Again, this isn't it's not like I was receiving a groundswell of support, honestly. I reached out to these people. They did not contact me. But nonetheless, I connected with, I wish I had wrote all their names down so I could tell you exactly how many, but 15 to 20 individuals, 2 to 3 of them made it very clear they would not be in support of this. But the vast majority of them said that they were interested. I laid out the millage rates to them as best I understood them at the time, which was the 0.33 and the 1.1, and they did not balk at those numbers. I want to speak for individuals who, again, are not here because they need to put dinner on the table and they have homework to do tonight. I want to put that decision before them. And if I can help facilitate that by recommending ballot language, I will be out there over the summer explaining why I want to make this place available for everyone. I can go to bed knowing that if that loses, I will have presented an option that I think is for as many people as possible. So, and those are the folks I heard from.
Trustee Sandlin.
I just have a question. The senior center only option, it showed a huge patio that we really don't need. Is that at the site plan review, or can you make modifications to match more of what the multi-purpose room is? And, on the 4A, you see that to the right? I mean, to make it look more like that rather than, because I'm thinking about it as community space versus a gym. I'm not crazy about funding a gym. And that seems like the left part of the screen is primarily a gym. So it seems like we're voting on a gym versus the nuts and bolts of the community center. That's kind of like what I'm looking at. And I want to vote for the right part of that and maybe leave in the future a gymnasium option. But I'm looking at, I don't want a huge patio. If I'm voting for the first option, I don't intend to vote for a huge patio. I thought I was voting for what appears to be on the right side of the screen, including a multi-purpose room, warming stations. Okay, so
Not an
was
option
that
one.
a site plan? I mean, is this written in stone?
Let's have Director Schmidt answer that.
Yeah, so again, as we've talked about and as our partners at Progressive have talked about, this is really the space planning exercise. We've kind of, I think they would tell us we've done this a little backwards, but this is the rough layout of the space, just showing that we can get within this box all of the items that everyone has indicated they want in a senior center. And in this one, this is the box that gets all of the items that everyone indicated they wanted in a community center. It's not the hard and fast design. The deck, candidly, the deck is probably not even in the budget. It was an addition as an amenity to show a connection to nature through the facility, right? You'd see through the facility and glass windows and deck, and you'd have an outdoor space, right? It's definitely not set in stone. What you have is sort of the rough outline of the building and the rough outline of the interior of the building. Walls aren't lined up, amenities aren't lined up, anything like that. Still to be determined once we get into full design.
Okay, thank you. That was the question I was asking, because it appeared like we were saying, okay, option one is less space, and that's not necessarily true. option one could be including all that space with a multi-purpose room and everything. I'm just saying. That, to me, it's more like, are we looking for a facility that is 30,000 square feet versus 10,000 square feet? You know, I mean, I'm looking at, do we want a gym or not? Do we feel like we really need a gym? That's what I'm looking at it as.
So from a staff perspective, I know the Parks Department, based on all of their research, knows that the gym would be the most utilized component of the building. It would be used for volleyball, pickleball, basketball, and it's not just open gym, right? It would be programmed times for youth recreation. And Director Wazinski can speak to that in far greater detail than I can, but option one is just what you see on this screen. So what Director Schmidt was explaining is that, yes, could some of these boxes and rooms, these little boxes that appear on the screen, get moved around? Yes, absolutely. We could shift the layout and the design, but what this showed us is how many square feet we need in order to accommodate everything that the Senior Center Advisory Board members expressed that they wanted, that the task force then kind of concurred with and asked us to plan into the facility. So that we ended up with a square footage. We know roughly what the cost is per square foot. So for option one, all the finances that you see on the table conform with building a facility of roughly that size. Same with option two. Option two is, the full-blown, full double gym, double court gymnasium, right? And that's what you're seeing in option four is we're taking out the second court, meaning the second full basketball court. Within that, then you have volleyball courts and pickleball courts too, so that you can use that basketball court for any of the sports options. So just to be clear, each option is fixed to what you see on the slide deck here. So option three would just be removing the youth recreation space and this activity meeting room. Option 4A and 4B would be removing the youth recreation room, the meeting activity room, and half the gym. So option 4A maintains the ability to build this addition right here, that second basketball court in the future, by making sure we have the right structure in the building. Option 4B, we would not be able to expand the gym at any point in time. So just to be clear, the finances are specific to the square footage that you see. Now, we could rearrange the building, but if you go with option 4A, we do not have funds to build this footprint here, and this footprint.
Trustee Wilson.
Dan, would you mind putting up option one again? So if we put option one before the voters, just like this, we can't add a warming kitchen and a multi-purpose room to it. It would be presented this way with maybe moving things around, but we could, it's a great deal of additional cost to bring in those other amenities. So I think we just want to be clear that a warming kitchen and that large multi-purpose room are not part of the design of option one, right?
Correct. Option one gets you what you see here. That meeting and activity room with the warming kitchen, that footprint was here, right?
Yeah.
So it got turned into a patio.
Yep.
We took it out because option one doesn't afford you the ability to build that additional square footage.
But shouldn't we know the details? I mean, why do we, on the surface, why, I don't support a huge patio when they could be utilizing that space.
That patio is a rounding error in the overall cost. It's $7 per square foot roughly for concrete. That isn't, what we're really looking at is the cost of the building footprint, which would be roughly the outline that my cursor is going around. So the patio, it's not like we have a highly detailed budget for option one where we break down every cost of that building. So the patio is kind of just an add-on. They're just throwing it in conceptually to show you that you could pour it. If we have a little bit of extra money, we could pour a patio there. Just like they showed trail routes, right? They show trail routes through here. We're not building trail routes through there with option one. That's just what designers and architects tend to do to give you options. Now, could we come up with a cost for that footprint? Yes, we could have. The problem is that tonight is your last chance to put it before the voters, and we would need time to actually run all those numbers. So that was not something that there seemed to be consensus around, so that's not something that we explored. The other thing that you have to keep in mind, the senior center only option, option one, is open 40 hours a week. There will be 2 staff members. So even on days where someone is on vacation for the week and the other staff member is sick, that facility will close. So even with the staffing that we're providing for the senior center, it still won't keep it open every day that it's intended to be open, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 throughout the year. To open it after hours, right, the hours for the community center and, well, community and senior center options, right, options 2 through 4B, the intention there is that it would be open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday. So that's 72 hours in a week. We proposed far more staffing to be able to keep it open 72 hours a week. We're going to have people that exclusively work practically, weekends and nights in order to do that. We will have certain staff that practically don't work 8 to 5 in order to keep it open. So you have to look at, yes, if we convert this to a community room, we can do that, but we're going to need 2 more personnel to work Monday through Friday from 5 to 8, and on Saturday from 8 to 8 to break up, someone has to clean up after the party that just came through and made a mess. Someone's got to empty the recycling bins. Someone has to rearrange tables and chairs. Someone has to make sure that the projector that they want is available. There's a lot of things, and if you're working late, we would prefer that parties not work alone. So we'd have to look at an additional programmer, an additional utility worker to deal with all the setup, breakdown, and custodial that comes with that. What's unique about the community room at the Central Fire Station is that building is staffed 365, 24/7. We have firefighters on site, so they kind of pitch in and help. There's no firefighters here to do that after hours work. We would have to staff that. So that's you're talking about $200,000 in additional annual cost for the personnel for one room. And so it does become a cost benefit factor of how much is it worth it to keep one room open in the evening, or even if we did manage to make this room and this room that are kind of open floor plans, we might be able to find a way that those become flex spaces in the evening. But even if we did, how much is it worth it to keep the facility open? Because it will be a significant cost to keep it open after 5.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Yes.
I'm still struggling to support 4A. I would like there to be more discussion, but at this point, if a motion is, if someone introduces a motion, then I will assess how to vote. But I just feel like 4A would upset those in favor of a standalone senior center and those in favor of a community center, which I guess is the perfect compromise, but it's just not what our community has asked for. And I'm referring to both perspectives of wanting a joint community senior center and wanting a standalone senior center. I could see this millage passing, but I think it would pass at a cost. There may be people who support a senior center and will vote in favor of this millage out of fear that they won't receive a new building. And this would be that sure way of receiving that senior center. And there may be people who vote in favor of the community center, but will never get to use it because of how much this option like reduces the community space that the residents have asked for. Or alternatively, the millage won't pass at all. And if we look at the statistics of the survey, that could be because residents who said that they wanted this community center may decide not to vote in favor because it's just too much of a tax burden during these uncertain times. So I think that's something we need to consider before moving forward and introducing this millage.
Thank you. Treasurer DeShane.
If you go back, we've got option 1 here, 20 years, under $10 million. If you go now to 4A, which is the one that the board seems to support, what do we have here for almost 4 times as much? You get 1 gym, you get new parks space. The Parks Department has a new space and kitchenette. You get locker rooms, and you get the multi-purpose room in the senior center. Is that really worth 4 times the cost for 1 gym, locker rooms, and a multi-purpose space? And new space for parks. Parks currently has space. They're in the service center. It's not like they're displaced. It'd be nicer space. They probably like these new digs, but it's not essential. It's not a need. It's a want. But we're losing so much with this thing. I think you're gonna have a hard time selling this. You got half the gym, you got no youth recreation, and you lose a big meeting room for 4 times the cost.
Are you advocating for option 2 then?
No, I'm advocating for option 1, but I'm telling you, option 4A is really losing a proposal. If you're gonna put a community center before the community, put a real community center. What you're offering here is something that's just going to beg for an addition from the day it's open. And I don't see the logic of that. If you want to do a community center, do a community center. Don't go halfway, because you're ending up with a third of a community center, half of a community center. And even that's speculation, because these are just our estimates, not the ones that come from the architect. Those are my thoughts.
Okay. Trustee Wilson.
I'm going to move option 4A, and there are 2 motions that are tie-barred together.
We should take them up independently.
I know we should. So I'm going to do the project bond first. Move to adopt the resolution authorizing the ballot proposal for the community and senior center bond option 4A.
It's been moved by Trustee Wilson. Does it have a support?
Support.
Supported by Trustee Lentz. Any further discussion on the motion to adopt the option 4A project bond? Yes, Trustee Lentz.
I'm just saying, I know we've been going at this for a while. Treasurer DeShane and Clerk Demas, I very much appreciate, what the perspective that you have being in this building full time, and with that, having the most direct communication with staff and township residents. I don't agree with the assessment that Treasurer DeShane, you listed of this being half a community center. I do think that, based on the expertise of Director Wazinski, there will be an ability to have those camps, the indoor pickleball, all the things that township residents have expressed that they're interested in. While it is not the perfect option, I don't think that existed. I'm happy to support it, and I very much appreciate the multiple options that you both listed, and of course Trustee Sunwin, who is not in this building full time, but still gives a lot to this community. So I want to thank you for that discussion.
Clerk Demas.
given the discussion that was had tonight. I appreciate everyone's perspectives. I have not heard enough information to be supportive of 4A, and so I will be voting no. I don't think that this is fair to our residents. I have not heard enough support for 4A specifically, like a reduced community center / senior center. I haven't heard enough support for just a joint community senior center recently. While I do think that it's good to provide voters the option to decide if they want a community center, I don't think that the way that we handle this item is responsible to our voters, and for me to support that decision under those pretenses would be unfair. And so I don't think supporting 4A is responsible, and so therefore I will be voting no.
Treasurer DeShane.
Like Clerk Demas, I will not be supporting 4A. We had some discussion about the silent majority of working parents that aren't here. They may be out there, but we heard from 15 people that gave up their Monday night to come and speak to us. That's rare. We haven't had 15 people in quite a while. There very well could be a very large silent group that is as vehemently opposed to this as those we heard tonight. So we may have just seen the tip of the iceberg in the opposition to this. So to do this, we are taking a big risk, as I said earlier, of losing the goodwill and the support that we have from our public, because this is a large tax proposal, around $44 million in a very difficult economic year. So for those reasons, I'm not going to support it, and I think there's a much larger majority out there opposing this than there is those in favor of it. Just the concept of a tax increase in 2025 is going to be anathema to many, many of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Others wishing to discuss? Well, I'll add as a final point, I think that we lose ourselves sometimes in the negative of a cost of something of this magnitude. And occasionally it's possible to forget that we are getting a major community asset should this pass in August. An asset that we can be proud of, an asset that fulfills a request that is made of us by our citizens year after year when we poll them, when we survey them about what it is that they want in the community. And perhaps Treasurer DeShane's right. Maybe the community doesn't have the appetite for, paying for this asset at this time. I think giving them the option to say that through their vote is not irresponsible. I think it's the way that democracy is meant to function. And I'll be out there talking to my friends, encouraging them to support this so that, we can get that kind of asset into our community. There's a degree to which the role of the board is to act as visionaries for what a better version of the township can be, right? Everyone, we had a terrific farmer's market, years ago. And the board put money, taxpayer money, behind creating a new farmer's market. And I think everyone here will agree what a gem that we have created, that the boards prior to me have created. And I think that we're asked today to have that vision. And yes, the national economy has people concerned, and I think rightly so. But I don't necessarily agree that means that we push the stop button on investing in our community until we got to change at the national level of, that we think is going to somehow stabilize things. And if the voters disagree, they disagree. And I'll listen to them and respect their decision, should that happen. I think all of us up here will. At this moment, I'm going to put my faith in the data that I have seen from, community survey to community survey to polling, and frankly, to the board's stated goals. And so I'll be supportive of the motion this evening. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Demas, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Lentz?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
No.
Trustee Trezise?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
Clerk Demas? No. Treasurer DeShane?
No.
Motion carries 4-3.
Do we have, Trustee Wilson?
I would now like to move the operating millage. Move to adopt the resolution authorizing the ballot proposal for a 10-year community and senior center operating millage option 4A, and to submit the question to the voters at an election to be held on August 5, 2025.
It's been moved by Trustee Wilson. Does it have a support?
Support.
Supported by Trustee Trezise. Any discussion on the motion? I think we've sort of talked about these on, yes. Trustee Sunland.
I thought we were looking at a 20-year commitment.
The bond.
The project bond
Is
is.
a 10-year commitment?
Sorry,
bond is-
operating is 10.
Operating is 10.
Project bond is 20.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Demas, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Trezise?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
Clerk Demas? No. Treasurer DeShane?
No.
Trustee Lentz?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-2.
Okay. Thank you very much. And just as a point of privilege here, I'll say, this discussion and debate is one of the hardest things that I know I've sat in on over the course of my tenure on the board. And I appreciate our willingness to have this discussion frankly, respectfully, and make a decision succinctly, really, and put it before the voters. So thank you all for the respectful discussion. It having been 2.5 hours since our last break, I'll ask that we take a 5-minute recess without objection. So ordered. I know, right?
How late was everyone's lunch?
I'm trying to scroll. Give me a second. Did you?
I didn't eat, so I just had breakfast.
Oh my goodness.
You didn't have lunch either? Goodness gracious.
Well, when you work at the clerk's office, you really have to do recreational.
Props to you, Andrew.
Okay. All right, we are all here. We'll call ourselves back to order at 9:33. We find ourselves at agenda item 10A. This feels less productive to get to item 10A now that we've taken off the 11 and 12 that didn't used to do anything, but we'll take it. For this one, this is the updated memorandum of understanding between Meridian Township and the Friends of Historic Meridian regarding the Meridian Historical Village. We have Director Wazinski here to tell us more.
Good evening, Board. So just a little history. So our historical village, which sits right over here, a gem of not just our community, but most communities. We're one of the few that we have in the state of Michigan, but even nationwide. The Friends of Historic Meridian, well, let me step back. The township owns the land and the buildings of the historic village. The Friends of Historic Meridian is the overseeing organization that leases the buildings and manages the buildings, and also manages, programs what happens at the village. So we have a memorandum of understanding that's relatively old. The latest version was in 2012. And as a result, when I was onboarded, started conversations with the Friends, the executive director, and then the president of the Friends of Historic Meridian. And what has happened over the years is the buildings are naturally old and are only aging, which is requiring a lot more maintenance each year as a result. In addition, the Friends of Historic Meridian's membership is also aging. So the volunteerism that has also helped to provide maintenance to some of the buildings is really not there anymore. And so what has happened is the township has been working to assist the Friends on how we can help with some of those maintenance items. As I understand it, over the years, it's just been progressing. So what we've done is we've looked at the MOU and said, what makes sense? And so what we've done is we went through each and every line item with, again, the executive director of the historic village, as well as the president of the Friends of Historic Meridian, our superintendent, Katie Adams, who manages all the maintenance within our parks. And over several months, we went through this MOU and decided, here's some of the things that we as a group decide or agree upon that would make most sense for the longevity of the village. So what I've done is you have in your packet an updated version with strikeouts of what we took out of the MOU, and then you'll see the bolded, underlined would be what we added. So I can just kind of briefly go through. It's not much, but it's really, in an essence, it took all the exterior components of this MOU and the maintenance, and the township is going to assume those. What that does is that allows us to budget for the maintenance. So currently and in past history, there's some things like when the HVAC system goes out at the Barnes house, that's a $6,000 bill. If the Friends don't have that fund, if they don't have those funds, then the township picks it up regardless, right? So this allows us to plan for future budgets, as well as just the changes in demographics of the Friends membership, as well as the aging buildings. So we added some non-building structures as they continue to, a lot of folks will call and say, hey, we've got this tractor, or we've got this old corn house, or windmill. So they've been assuming those types of amenities as well. And of course, we're not included in this MOU because they happened afterwards. So we added those non-building structures to this MOU. The terms of agreement was for 2 years. As I mentioned, the last MOU was in 2012. So as we discussed, it made most sense that every 5 years we relook at this MOU at a minimum. So we increased that from a 2-year agreement to a 5-year agreement. We removed the Friends' responsibility of conducting an annual inspection. Prior to my onboarding, there was ARPA funds that were designated towards the historical village. Our previous director, Maisner, as well as our superintendent, Katie Adams, had a full assessment completed by a consultant of every building and all of the amenities at the village. They developed a list, prioritized that list of what maintenance needs were needed. With the ARPA funds, just this past year, we completed that entire list. So we're caught back up, if you will. So now we're back to a maintenance as opposed to more preventative maintenance than reactive maintenance. Let's see. Mentioned here, we added all the exterior structural repair to the roles and responsibilities of the township and not the Friends. Another thing that comes up quite often, because again, they're old buildings, and even though we work to, patch any areas of intrusion from pests, it still happens. The buildings aren't always occupied. They are conditioned, but we get a lot of mice, or there's, other rodents that get into the building. We were assisting with that as well, but we were assisting on paying their contractor when we are already doing that within the department for everywhere else. So we thought it just makes sense that we just add this to our existing budget for pest management. We removed the requirement of the office space to be in the Heathman house only. That was in there. They already have moved the office to the Barnes house. So they built an addition, and the office for the Friends sits in the Barnes house. So this just made sense. Removal of the requirement of the Park Commission to provide public service programs in Central Park for the general public. The Friends program the village. So Park Commission, still oversees the village because it is a park, but that Friends are the ones that provide all that programming as it is, and they prefer to do that as well. We added advertising events in our Parks and Rec department as responsibilities, so we can assist, and this has been happening anyways, but just to make sure we put it in here, that we assist in outreach for their events that they hold there. And then there's just some minor verbiage changes throughout. That was in the MOU itself. The lease is attached to this MOU in the back. And we made one change there, which it was to remove the requirement of the Friends to pay the chapel's consumer energy bill. As I understand it, when the chapel was built, now the chapel's, it's not a historic building, it's a rendition. That was part of the agreement, was that they would pay the energy bill. We're paying the energy bill on everything else, so it just made sense that we assumed that as well. That are the major changes that you have in your packet. Again, strikeouts, and then bolded and underlined for any additions. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you
Any
very
questions?
much. Board members, discussion, Treasurer DeShane.
The Friends of Meridian is an incredible asset to this community, and the work those volunteers do is phenomenal. With more of this work falling on our DPW staff, Dan right here, maybe can you estimate how much additional work this is requiring on a monthly basis by your staff to do this maintenance?
That is a question for Director Wazinski, as she and one of our public works superintendents have been primarily working on that.
Okay.
So we share utility workers, but this is park maintenance staff that takes that on. I'm not sure, Treasurer, if I could give you a number, but I will say it has increased over time, and it doesn't appear to be leveling off much. So they're old buildings, they require a lot of work. So it takes a lot of time on our staff. What we did get, though, was the robo mowers. So the robo mowers that we had purchased 2 years ago are in the historical village in Nokomis. So that helps with our staff time.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I have one minor thing that you want to look at, which is on page 2 of the memorandum of understanding. There's some duplicative language. You say water, sewer, plumbing, electrical. This is in the first main paragraph. And, comma, repair and maintenance. You struck something out, and then you said repair and maintenance a second time.
I got it.
Probably can remove one of those, unless you want to be doing double duty. And then my question is, when maintenance to the exterior of these facilities has been happening in the last few years, is it fair to say that we've been, the ARP money covered the most recent, but even before that, were we covering the cost for that by and large?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so really, while it looks like we're taking on a bunch of additional cost, the actual practical understanding is that we are simply codifying current practice and dollars out the door.
That's exactly right.
And where does that money come from?
So money comes out of our maintenance budget, which covers all of our parks, all of our preserves, all of our
funds.
Yes. So again, it allows us to budget better, given what our park funds are, what our fund balance is, if we can plan for what maintenance we need as opposed to it just coming to us.
So you're giving Director Schmidt another line on his CIP.
I want to combine them for him.
Fair enough. All right, then this seems like a no-brainer to me. Trustee Wilson.
I had a question. The executive director is part-time, right?
Holly Cordell is part-time, correct.
And is she in your budget for personnel?
The Friends of Historic pay her salary.
And what if they can't pay her salary? Because they've been unable to fundraise. And they pay her salary as a 501c3?
She's our employee.
Yeah. Trustee Wilson, there's always that risk, right? And so in addition to this, we're working the outreach. That was one of the things where how do we get more revenue to come back into the village? We can do that from the department or from the township in our outreach and things like that for their programming. But there is always a risk when you have a 501c3.
Okay, and the one other question I had was the land preservation superintendent. I didn't find that description in the budget. Who is that?
That is Katie Adams.
Got it.
Yep. and she shares, she's superintendent, but she's also a naturalist, so.
Thank you.
Yes.
Board members, any discussion, any concerns with the changes that were brought before us? See some not shaking heads. Barring any major concerns, then we'll see this back on our next agenda for this for action.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Actually, before I go.
Yes, sir.
There being no major concerns, are we comfortable putting this on consent agenda? Just to speed things along?
Yes.
Let's do that as long as the lawyers don't object. Thank you. Next on our agenda is item nope. I'm so used to saying 13. 10B, the Pierce Contender fire engine sale. For this, we have Manager Dempsey.
Yes. So back in December of last year, the board authorized putting this on the surplus property list that was approved. As the staff were preparing to get that off to auction, we were approached by Santa's first responders, as you heard this evening from Gaylord Mankowski, who presented a proposal to utilize it for community benefit. The conversation with him was essentially that the township has a fiduciary duty and responsibility on disposition of excess property to be able to seek at least fair value. We did have our mechanic, one of our mechanics, evaluate the engine. Of course, it hasn't been in service now for a little bit, and we have 2 replacement engines that have, been purchased by the township. So, in assessing that, he determined the value is roughly in the $7,000 to $10,000 range. So they went off and very quickly raised $7,000 and presented that obviously in a letter of intent that we have. And then again, you heard the presentation this evening, their intent to use it as a public benefit and keep it in the community for a different purpose and take all responsibility for storing it, maintaining it, insuring it, et cetera. So if the board is interested, we can have a purchase agreement prepared by our attorneys and presented to you at your next meeting. But happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions? Well, I'll say that, Santa's first responders, before I joined the board, I wasn't familiar with the body of their work. And shortly after I joined the board, of course, we had the Nob Hill fire. And the quick reaction that they had to supporting those residents and their children specifically through that, in addition to, as I've learned since, their work with Sparrow and the children that are in the hospital at Christmas time. It's really commendable work. I think that there isn't a better community organization in our community that we could pick to take this on, especially given their nature as former first responders and current first responders, I guess, to that matter. So I'm in favor of progressing with this sale.
Great.
Yes.
Other board members? Treasurer DeShane?
I concur. Knowing Gaylord Mankowski for as long as I've been involved in the township, 12 years now, I've known Gaylord, and he's an exceptional citizen, does so much to benefit the community. I think this is the perfect use of the old fire engine. And it has some value, and we have to sell it for that value. And the fact that they can pay us for it and then use it for these great community purposes it truly is a win-win. So I'm excited about this.
And the fact that, as he pointed out, they'll be bringing it to a bunch of community events. It's not really leaving the family in that way.
Exactly.
So, seeing no objections, can we bring this back for action at our next meeting, please?
Yes. I would say you could put
sorry,
it on the
trustee
consent
Trzaskowski.
agenda too.
Well, I think it's a purchase agreement, so we may have to actually take action on it
That's true.
since it's monetary.
Okay.
So let's bring it back for a quick action item.
Sure.
Okay. That brings us to item 11, which is comments from the public. We have a number of members of our public still present. Barbara O'Kelly. Rules apply, I should say.
I just wanted to thank the board for all the time and effort that they've put into this. I'm glad that there is going to be something on the ballot. And I'm sure that you're reminded that the outlines of rooms and things in this, that's just to show that the space is available. There's another whole project to design the interior space, and even you've really voted on the square footage that's going to be requested, and the configuration of that footage can be rearranged. So I hope that we get a chance to work with the staff of the township in order to do that. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Chris or Dave, would you like to weigh in at this time? Okay. All right, seeing no other members of the public present wishing to make comment, we'll close public comments at 9:51 PM. Next on our agenda is item 12, other matters and board member comments. Any other matters and board member comments this evening? Clerk Demas.
I just want to say that we as the board have voted in favor of option 4A, which is the reduced community senior center, and that would put these millages on the ballot for the August 5th election. If the ballot language is approved, I will make sure to work hard with our election workers and staff to ensure the election will be free and fair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or discussion at this time? Seeing none, item 13 is for adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Treasurer DeShane. Support. Supported by Trustee Wilson. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We stand adjourned at 9:52 PM.